Hi, my name is Bob Greenyer and I'm a volunteer with the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. So thank you for joining me this 9/11/2022, and if you're having a sense of deja vu, you're not the only one, because I think we've done this before just a little while ago, but we didn't go very well because this cable someone had plugged from one router port to another router port, so it was going around in circles, not going to the internet. So that was the problem that caused the failure of the network. Anyway, we are going to be able to do this, I think, with some aplomb and hopefully some modicum of success. So let's, without further ado, get on with it. So we started off by talking about ODE, gravity transformation, and the word transformation was in the slide that I shared many moons ago from ODE, which was to do with the scarab beetle from the Egyptians, and it's one of the things that the scarab beetle is meant to represent, transformation, and that will also come in the abstract for my presentation to the Russian community, I believe in October at their conference, which will be virtually held. And this presentation is hopefully going to explain ultra, HHO and more. I've lost a few hours, but anyway, we'll do what we can. And the image you're seeing on the screen there is the Webb telescope latest image of the Phantom Galaxy. And this is a spiral galaxy. You can see a spiral arm here and a spiral arm here. And it is a spiral bar galaxy. So in the center you have this kind of rectangular area, this bar, and I believe I'm right in saying that most spiral galaxies are bar galaxies like this. So there we go, and we're going to look at this, but before I do that, I'm going to go and show my presentation slides. It's not my presentation slides, my presentation abstract that has been accepted for the condensed matter nuclear science in Assisi in Italy, starting the week of the 26th of this fair month, and so I will go there now. And the name of the presentation is Ultra, a simple, quick and repeatable demonstration of the linear process. And this is thanks to the combined efforts of myself and Alan Goldwater, David Boutillier and Henk Uren that really nailed it, but there's so many more people, and they are mentioned within this. Some of them are mentioned within the actual abstract. So a patent application by Dr. Roy Shinamasa in 2007 claimed synthesis of an array of elements from the 100 Hertz vibration of water for 100 plus hours. This was reported in Cold Fusion Now in 2013. Testing by the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project in 2019 in Japan of the water vibration systems of Dr. Roy Shinamasa in Japan revealed that the system produced ultrasound and vortex pair structures with vortical transmutation patterns and tracks emitted from the center of these vortex structures. An indium foil was exposed to this agitated water, and it appeared to show transmutations also. A serendipitous event followed in Alan Goldwater's Magic Sound Lab during the ultrasonic cleaning of indium foil control sample. Again, it appeared that transmutation had occurred due to resonant sound interaction. Realizing the long history of ultrasonic-driven transmutation in Lena field, Stringham, Ohmasa, Leclerc, Dardick, Ralka, Claytor, etc., could be replicated in a trivial way, in September 2019, the principal author proposed simple experiments whereby an affordable, typically $35, domestic ultrasonic cleaner would be used with fixed metal foils in light water with the interaction studied. The first third party to attempt replication, Alan Cusk, chose aluminium Kitchen foil and noticed interesting marks repeatedly forming. This was rapidly replicated by many researchers all over the world. On further examination, it was shown that these structures are extremely intense vortex pairs that appear to resonantly focus energy and matter, leading to a very predictable yin-yang cone pit structure, which appears to conduct the synthesis of elements as well as balancing of them. The synthesis occurs within seconds, in all cases, in and around the core of these vortical structures, making it easy to verify. David Boutillier found that some of the aluminium cones torn away from the bulk foil could be harvested by a magnet, since other systems that the MFMP had examined, microwave plasma, natural ball lightning, and water electrolysis, had appeared to produce iron-rich crenellated microspheres. It was predicted that these would be present. Alan Goldwater subsequently ran an experiment and on first attempt found equivalent iron-rich crenellated microspheres. They were subsequently found synthesized in another MFMP low-pressure air-gas discharge system, Vega. It is believed this repeatable experiment shows the basis for all LENR. Okay, so this is a slide from my poster presentation at ICCF 22 in 2019. And we have our cardioid structure, our figure of 8, where you have this kind of the top of the heart here, and it comes down a little bit here. And if you've been following what we discussed in the last presentation, this effectively is one structure and another structure, and there's a flux loop between here, and this makes it like a thallico-soliton structure, but of course that itself produces a toroidal moment that comes out here, and we can discuss that at great length in other data that we've showed, but I'm not going to do that right here. At the center of these, it would appear to have some sort of diamond structure, and on the spiral arms of the galaxy, or the vortex here, we have double carbon, which is magnesium, and the blue area here is double magnesium, or quad carbon, and that is chromium. And so that's very interesting. From the center, you've got carbon, then double carbon on the spiral arms, and in the surrounding area, you've got quad carbon. So that tells you something maybe about what's going on. Now, like the spiral galaxy, the phantom galaxy, this is one of my experiments that I conducted, not more than a few minutes long, and this is typical, where you have a cone with a pit in it and a pit with a cone in it, and this cone has broken up. Now, firstly, in the pit of the cone, okay, you have this darkened area here, which we know it appears to be rich in carbon. But in the center, it has boron, which is a lighter element than the aluminium. Obviously, it's heavier than the hydrogen, but it's also lighter than the oxygen, okay? And it's not lighter than carbon. Over here, we have a spiral structure with this central circular section in the middle, and this is key structure that we will be looking at. And then we have, it would appear, I think it was silver or something, some heavier elements on the center here. So this had heavier elements here, and the other one had lighter elements. Is that relevant? I don't know. Maybe we'll find out in time. And this was the crenellated iron-rich microsphere that was found by Alan Goldwater, one of several rather, and he also found what appeared to be a hollow section from this. Okay, now in next week's presentation, I'm going to talk about how these fractal toroidal structures lead, in my view, through to the formation of these spheres and these toroids and other structures that we've witnessed in the Vega experiment. But I'm going to leave that for another day. What I will first do is I will show you some other data here from another presentation called Crop Circles. Here we have it, and on the front slide here I have another one of our experiments here. This was done in 13th of September 2021, and there's some element, something synthesized coming out of the crack in the pit of the cone here. But this is in Binjuin Huang's work from the New Energy Center, Department of Mechanical Engineering, National Taiwan University, and you know, we're using aluminium here, but he is using copper. Now, I will come to why aluminium, copper, and indium really work in this technology, and why some other things like iron and carbon are resistant. Okay, but if you're following along with what we said last week and what we're going to say today, I think these things will become obvious. So what you can see here is this bar spiral structure at the center of this raised area in a pit. Okay, and so that is that, and we will pick out a few other slide areas here that are important. So that's a close-up on that. The interesting thing is this is kind of comes from this is the raised area in the pit, and it's sort of come out of here, and then it's going down into the base area of this pit structure. So it's coming out from the center and then going down. I don't know quite what's going here because maybe something's going on from the other side. But in my view, some force is pulling things through here. and there's a central area here where it's just very different. Okay, so we'll look at that later. And here's some more images from Binger and Huang's work, and these are the element transmutation. So he had some carbon on this top surface here, and in the bottom of this pit he had some carbon and silicon, it would appear, forming. Okay, so, and I drew this image before about the sort of rough structure of this, and I've got another image for you today, and I like to keep it to the raw sketches, and we will show that later, and I think it will be quite inspirational for people. Again, this is a toroidal or twisted vortex structure coming out of the raised part, or the pit, in this one. It doesn't appear to be so raised in this one. This has got a dimple in the top, and if you go in close, it's got this spiral in the top there. So that is that, and that's, I think, all I need to talk about on that one, and then we can go back to our core presentation. Okay, so I'll close that one down, and we're back in the room with here. Okay, so if you recall, way back in 2017 or early 2018, I took some images of the crust on the Lion reactor, and in there I found these structures which I presented at Sochi on 4th of October 2018. And really, this, along with other things that were in the Lion and Hutchison samples, basically helped me understand, in my view, what was going on. So in this little blob here, we have what looks like a 3-armed spiral galaxy. And this one, we have a 2-armed spiral galaxy. And these 2 spots in the center, I believe, are very, very relevant. And if we go and look at what Matsumoto found in 1993, those people that have access to his book, and I've just put a spiral in there, so we'll put that over there. There are kind of 2 spots here with the spiral coming in, and there's this dead zone in the middle, and I think that is very relevant. Okay, so what are we actually looking at here? And I see that Gordon Doherty is saying one consumes the black hole and one produces the white hole. Yes, I think you're probably right, but I want to pull this back to another slide that I shared in Sochi in 2018. And this is a little bit wordy, so I'll read it because it may not come through for you. But this is something that came out of an interview with Stanislav Adamenko, who ran a team of up to 100 scientists for about 6 years at the old isotope factory outside of Kiev in the Ukraine. And he had this thing called the Proton 21 lab, where he had this particular reactor where he would fire through a plasma sort of inductive relativistic discharge apparatus into a metal sample, and he would have these accretion disks, often made of the same pure metal sample, and they would he found on the first experiment, thousands of experiments later, every single one worked, in that there was transmutation and these strange radiation and other forms of radiation emitted. And he says it's from self-collapsing or collapsing electronucleus macroclusters. And they found the synthesis of pretty much every element in the periodic table and beyond. But this is absolutely critical, and I believe that we're going to be able to understand exactly what's going on, if not now, but very soon. So I'm going to read this through, but thank you to the APAC for hosting this interview back in 2016, and I will read it now. So we were studying the nuclear transformation products of exploded metal targets by secondary ion mass spectrometry using the Kamika IMS at 4F. We discovered a number of spots on the surface of several 99.98% pure copper accumulating screens in which no scope signal from the secondary ions were recorded. Now, what you do with secondary ion mass spectrometer, you fire a beam of ions that are accelerated. They hit your sample and they smash off some ions from the sample, and they go down a drift tube, and you then can detect what elements and isotopes are there. Okay, so basically the crux of our observation was the absence of secondary ion flux in the scope for the entire range of ion masses analysed by the device in the area of the black spots. In following the normal procedures for interpreting the images of the ion microprobe, we can only conclude that in the case of these anomalous black spots, not only are they not composed of any of the known chemical elements, but they are also not composed of any type of previously undiscovered heavier element. In the case of our equipment, up to 480 AMU, which is the boundary of the range of the IMS-4F, i.e., there was nothing coming off that they could detect from 1 AMU to 480 AMU. They couldn't detect anything bigger than 480 AMU. There was basically nothing coming out of these black spots. Our operators have been making observations of this kind for decades, and this was the first time they'd encountered this type of anomaly. If it wasn't any type of known atom, then what could it possibly be? We obsessively searched all of the specialty literature for an answer, but didn't find any description of a similar phenomenon ever being documented before these events. We noticed something else also. Even stranger than the lack of secondary ions, we were subjecting the black spots to a heavy ion bombardment in an attempt to pick up a secondary signal, when we realized that not only were we not seeing a secondary signal, but there was also a complete absence of a signal from the primary ions in the beam of the microprobe. The ions that we bombarded the spot with simply seem to have disappeared, quite literally without a trace. At first, I refused to believe that this could even be possible, because the primary ions are reflected, scattered, so they hit the surface and they bounce everywhere, yeah? From any surface in such a great amount that the secondary image of these ions on the display is transformed always into a continuous glow on the scope's viewing screen. This omnipresent background signal is the reason that the scope's display is automatically switched off after a period of time to prevent screen burn from the primary ions. As improbable as it may sound, the absence of reflected primary ions from the surface of the black spot must indicate that the primary ions arriving at the spot surface were captured by it. In another attempt to get a signal from the spot surface, the operator gradually scanned the whole dynamic range of masses of the secondary ions accessible to the device. This was performed a while after the primary beam was switched off. While slowly turning the knob of the device, the operator noticed a flickering spot with decreasing intensity near 433 AMU. This flicker was positioned inside the black spot and occupied a small part of its area, and several seconds after the beginning of the observation, the brightness of the flickering spot decreased to 0. So they have this black spot, they're firing beams at it, ions at it, and they then see that in the center of this black area, there is a bright spot, and that after a period of time, when they turn off the beam, this bright spot decays and decreases its luminosity to 0. The luminous spot against the background of the black area disappeared. We repeated this new experiment by switching the beam on again for several minutes and again switching it back off. The image of a flickering spot at the mass of 433 AMU arose with the same initial brightness and again disappeared from view within several seconds. In both cases, the boundaries of the black spot were invariable. After repeating this power cycling and observation routine 12 times, we established that the initial luminous intensity of the 433 AMU spot after a pause was proportional to the duration of the pause, i.e. they're holding on this black spot, they're firing the beams, and it got brighter and brighter as more beams the longer they dwelled on the spot, it got brighter and brighter. But he says, and the decrease in luminosity intensity as it faded from view had an exponential character. During the analysis of another black spot with the use of the ionic microprobe, the operator observed a pattern similar to that described above, but different in that the luminosity arose not inside the black spot, but instead occurred in non-uniform manner along the length of the black spot's winding boundary. So this wasn't just something happening in the center of a black spot. This was a bunch of some things around in a loop where the same thing occurred on each of these various points. Okay. Right. So I've said before that I think this is behaving like a black hole. But what it's definitely doing, it would appear to be capturing matter and not letting it be released. And it's not of something that you can hit and get the thing to fly off. It's basically what goes in doesn't come in, it stays in. Yeah? Okay. So, we've seen something that may be similar, I don't know, but let's see. This was in the Lion 1 cracked copper oxide, which we've discussed at length. And here you see this glassy copper oxide. It's glassy copper oxide everywhere. And there is this toroidal looking structure. And if we go into it, here's a close-up look. And it has this kind of, well, something around here, which is slightly different with these bits going in, which are kind of like spirally, but I don't know. But this looks like a hole, and there's a gap, and then there's this structure on the outside. So, given what we've witnessed over the years, I am suggesting that this was our toroid, potentially a toroid of toroids. And we now know that this has a diality angle, a vacuum current potentially, or you can consider that it has a toroidal moment. And I think you're going to start to understand where that toroidal moment acts. And I believe it's in this central area. There's nothing, and then there's an event horizon, and then you get this toroidal moment interacting. Okay? So, this, I believe, is similar to this toroid, which was observed in an HHO system, in my view, an electrical discharge, biased electrical discharge, onto a metal plate through water, and it produced these long-lived plasmoids, toroidal in nature, that were lasting for up to 2 days. So I believe that this is the toroid. It's, bright in the center, but it has this little tail that comes off it. And I believe that if you rotated this structure, or flipped it rather, you would end up with this, where it's got this little tail over here, and this is the center. So are we seeing here something which is actually at the center of a toroid, and the toroid's on the outside? You're just seeing the intense glow, which may be similar to the intense glow here, and the black spot is the area around it. That is the electromagnetic phantom. Now, I believe 100% certainly that everything you need to create an electromagnetic phantom from this self-organizing, instantaneous self-organizing process would have occurred in the Adamenko systems. And we know that it produces strange radiation, so it's definitely a thing that one could expect. Okay? And so maybe we are looking at the core of the large sort of electromagnetic phantom. And that is the case, I believe, for this structure in the Lion reactor. Of course, where we have seen this even bigger is in the Hutchison samples. And we've looked at the Hutchison sample from 1986, I believe it is, which is in stainless steel. And we have this structure here. And this is, I think, 40 microns across, and this is 4 centimeters across in aluminium, which was done in 2007, both by John Hutchison. And they have exactly the same hexagonal overlay in these things. And it has this little spiral coming off. Now, are we looking at something which is at the center of an electromagnetic phantom? And if this is 4 centimeters across, John was creating some mighty huge electromagnetic phantoms. And what we understand now, or we can potentially think we are seeing, is that this is a result of the toroidal moment. And in this case, in the steel. You can see this vortical nature to it, these things going on. It's clearer in the steel, even though that this is a much smaller thing. And we've got this on scanning electron microscopy as well. And it looks like in the aluminium, it's more fracturing here, and it's just churning here. And is this all carbonized or whatever, or is a lot of the density of this material gone? Certainly it looks like it's eaten away here. Okay, so and then I've argued that if you take the vortex which is produced, and I call these the spirals. This is in the Echo system, which is a plasma discharge through water, much like we just saw with Bogdanovich. And this is in the Vega Eastern Plateau, and we've got the same kind of spiral going on. What you're looking at, in my view, here is the effect from the electromagnetic phantom of the looking end on to the torus. So like kind of like this, and there would be a spiral coming out of here, and in certain materials it affects it more than others, and it will become very clear why copper and zinc are affected. Okay, so this is in the fused quartz of the Lion 1 reactor, and we have these triangles, and it's a brittle material, and because of the nature of the material, it gets affected differently to things like copper and zinc and aluminium. The aluminium has a much softer triangle to it. This is one of the triangles, which is quite large, but there are very physically massive ones on this sample. They are many centimeters across, large triangles. And this is on the iron sample, where you have these triangles here. And I believe that this triangle is this toroidal moment, and the substructures flying around in here, and they come down to the point here, which is this point here in this triangle, this black spot here. This is in my view, a hole, right, at the end of the triangle. We've got kind of like a hole here. There probably would have been a hole here, but this kind of spot, okay? And I believe what's happening is you get one forming here and one forming here, and they're bucking, and it ends up by literally tearing the matter apart. And they twist and rotate because of the intense forces and the way that it manipulates the electrons in the matter. Now, where have we seen something similar to our toroid of toroids? Well, I spoke about this for a long time ago, and that was the work of John Archibald Wheeler, Geons. And if you haven't read this paper, I seriously suggest you read it. And I have to give my hat tip to Josh Hannon for alerting me to this many moons ago. But this does look a lot like our kind of structure that we are talking about here. And this is what this figure is said. The comment on this figure. Figure 1. Regions of strong electric field strength in a simple toroidal Geon. Simple toroidal Geon? What's a complex toroidal Geon? Well, this is what he published. A simple toroidal Geon of 0 angular momentum, i.e. this is not rotating. So it would produce, in my view, the same kind of thing that we saw and derived this from on the Hutchison sample. It's not going round at all. It's a static 0 angular momentum. 2 waves of equal strength run around the torus in opposite directions. What are those waves? Could they be coherent matter waves? Yeah? The matter wave of all the matter has come together, and it's made a much larger version of itself. It's like a macro electron, okay? 2 waves of equal strength run around the torus in opposite directions to produce a standing wave. A standing wave? A standing wave? Really? With electric fields strong in the regions indicated. So the electric fields are very strong in these bubbles. Okay? And magnetic fields strong in the regions in between. The gravitational field created by this disturbance and required to hold the disturbance together is representable to a good approximation as a static and independent of azimuth. So I believe that he's referring to this beam. Okay? It is this beam that's coming through the center. This is the gravitational part of this electromagnetic structure. This sounds very similar to what we are referring to, but I will note that he says this is a simple toroidal Geon, but he never goes into a complex one. But this is the paper where he comes up with wormholes and black holes. This is the paper, this paper here on Geons is where he comes up with black holes and wormholes, the terms that people have used since. Okay, so have we seen any impacts a little bit similar to this? Well, I'm going to show you some images I took with the Sony Alpha and the Laowa x5. And this is of the upper area of the sheath of the anode in the Vega experiment. And why this is interesting is because, like in the 10-yen coin and in very many other experiments, the most interesting things that occur outside of the bulk of the activity. And I've shown you some real-time stuff when we were looking at it with the microscope, this area, but it doesn't give you the quality that this gives you. And it looks like this has disrupted the quartz. So this is very, very important. I'm talking about disruption. And why is that? Well, I think we might be able to realize why metal goes to jelly, why metal falls apart because it's different type of metal, and also why other materials like ceramics are disrupted. Something is going on, and I've said for a very long time, with these things that are interacting with, fused quartz like the one that's on here, this toroid here, it's not melting the fused quartz. It is not a thermal process. It's a process that is interacting with the matter in a very different way. And if you read the papers that I left you with for a couple of weeks, you will know that the toroidal moment can interact with electrons. But I believe, and I think it's indicated in some of those papers and other work that if you read around the subject, that it can interact with other leptons. Hold that in mind, it'll become clearer. Okay, so you can see that we have these structures around here that have got these, this is kind of like a hectagonal or septagonal or octagonal structure, but it has these substructures to it. This is maybe not the best example. This one is definitely a pentagon here. This is definitely a pentagon. Are these two a pair? Don't know. Are these two a pair that are coming in? Don't know. Okay. Here is one that's a little bit clearer. Do we have a little spiral on here, or is it an S shape in the center? Don't know. But it certainly has some segments around the top. Okay, there's one that has some geometry down here. There's other ones where you can literally see on this particular one here when you get the slides, where it's a ring, it's kind of come in at an angle and it's kind of broken up, and you have these substructures, these subrings that are in groups around it. This is obviously a hexagonal structure. Again, it's got this central point on it. This one is a kind of, this is using Peter S's simulation of these torus from using Blender, which is available on remoteview.icu. So if you want to go and try and simulate these structures, so it's not quite the same number of segments as up here, but you can kind of get the idea. If something like an electromagnetic phantom was to come in to collide with this quartz, and the substructure diality angles, or the substructure vacuum currents, or the substructure toroidal moments were to interact with this, you would get something that would produce this kind of sort of scenario. Okay, here we again have something. Now, did this go into the surface a little bit more? Don't know, but it would appear that we have a number of segments around the outside, and then in the segments you have subsegments, and then in the subsegments you can see 1, 2, 3 rings here, 1, 2, 3. Now, is it because it's embedding itself, or have we actually got two toroids that are traveling together? I don't know, but definitely there's something centrally different about what's going on. Are these what, if if John Archibald Wheeler, who was involved with the Manhattan Project, who was someone who taught Feynman a lot of things, would he call these more complex Geons? I don't know. But anyway, moving on. Here is a physical structure. Now, I imagine these as one of these vacuum currents, these toroidal phantoms that interacted with matter and got some of the matter coherent along with its overall structure. And so this one is on the eastern plateau of the Vega Valley, and I've talked about it before, and I've just got a simulation here. And it looks like as it crashed down, it left a carbon trail behind it. So it kind of maybe hit the ground here and started to get distorted, and it came to rest here. And was it carrying these other brighter elements which are likely to be copper with it, where they're just traveling along for the ride? Is the copper something where some of this material was going in and got converted to carbon? I don't know, but this is what we see. And it's a bit like the one that we saw the blowout of on the crenellated sphere. And here is another example which is more direct, with more segments to it. Does it have some overall kind of hexagonal geometry? I don't know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is it pentagonal? Let's go back to our ones over here. We have a 6-sided one. Is this a 5-sided one? I don't know. But you get these things. This might be 5-sided. So there's a range of different polygonal. This is definitely 5-sided, and this is definitely 5-sided. So is this the kind of electromagnetic phantom that collided with the quartz here? Is this the looking more at the substructure, but this gathered up some calcium and so forth here? Don't know. Right, is everyone able to follow along here? Have I made any faux pas here? Yes? No? Don't know. Okay. Right. So, well, you know, we've been sharing these things for a good while now, but very excitedly, back in the 28th of April 2021, there was a tip-off to me by Nick Moore of this supposed transition from an atomic to a molecular Bose-Einstein condensate, and it was published on 28th of April 2021 in Nature. And this is apparently the first time that physicists have harnessed thousands of molecules into a single quantum state. I disagree wholeheartedly, but it's certainly the first time that they've agreed to publish something that looks like this. And I believe that this is a torus, and it is made of substructures of torus, and it has a different thing going on in the center to the outside, and I believe we've got a hexagonal structure here. And as impressive as this was to them, I think people like Henk producing these kind of things and 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 these kind of things are as impressive, if not more so, as these things produced rather than the first time it supposedly had been produced, as these wonderful sample from John Hutchison and these structures and these structures and these structures. So I don't think it's the first time, but it's the first time everyone's agreed to publish an image of something like this. Okay, so I think these kind of structures where you have these segments around the outside in a sort of toroidal fashion was actually published by Solin in 1992 in his patent, and we replicated something here in Lion, or rather Lion did, and I identified it, and this is the same thing that you see on shoulders. Now, what I have noticed, when you get these kind of regular structures, like this one and this one, you also, not this one so much, but this one and this one, you also get 2 spots in the center. Okay, there are other examples. I will move my mugshot out the way. There are 2 spots in the center here, and we've got 2 spots in the center here, and something that almost looks like it's going round between these. I don't know, but there's something going on, I believe. Okay. Anyway, Solin talked about these, and we will actually refer to what he considered those were to be later, and I think it's very relevant to what you're saying here and what we've talked about with coherent matter waves over many years. Okay, so I'm going to zoom into this. So this is what I'm talking about. In the center here, you've got these 2 spots and something that appears to be going round in between these. So that's something to think about, okay? And we'll probably come back to this next week. So moving on, we are looking at this, which I shared many, many moons ago. And this is a video macro frame from the Sony. This is from the Dino light here, and this is from the scanning electron microscopy. We have established that the raised bit in the pit and the dimple in the cone, the overall structure is absolutely identical ratio to the ancient yin-yang symbol. One is a maker, one is a breaker. They are very complementary, and they bring this wonderful binary nature of the universe, instability, and this self-organizing nature of the universe. I don't believe the entropy argument. I believe this is the nature of the universe. It is not necessary to have the Big Bang. You can synthesize elements and you can desynthesize elements, and you know it's just the universe and the force behind it is just incredible. Okay, so what we found was that in high-speed photography, when you stop the sound, we witnessed a toroid that goes around this central area here, this toroid that goes around this central area here. And you can see it sort of lifting off here. And if you go and look at the on remote view to ICU and you search under the term ultra, you will find this, and you will see that these things eventually joins into a bubble. One time the bubble comes round and it gets round to the top of the cone and it fires a helical beam into the top of the cone, which is interesting in its own right. But we're going to focus on this toroid in a minute. But before that, I want to show some other work, and I need to find the paper and pull that up so that I've got it ready when I reference it. So give me a second. And what is it? Okay. No, that's not going to help, is it? Let me try this. Well, we'll want that in a minute, so we'll have him talk amongst yourselves. Okay. Let me see if I can find it here. Oh, this is not very smooth. I will get there. Okay, is it this one? Is this one? Yeah, okay, this one. So I've spoken about this paper before. Let me just assume it is. Get this. Is it this one? I hope it's this one. Yeah, it's this one. Okay. No, it's not. Oh no. Yes, it is. Okay. All right. We'll put a note in there so I won't get this wrong. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. So this is due to ultrasonics cavitation in water. Okay? Something is going on that is producing this. Okay? So is this. This is rings of streaming bubbles at 25 kilohertz. So not 43 kilohertz like we were doing, but rings of from 25 kilohertz. Scattered light exposure 0.8 of a millisecond. The picture height approximately 4 centimeters here. It seems even possible to have closed rings when the end cluster or filament of one arc appears to feed another one and vice versa. This case is presented in the figure. However, it remains to be shown that indeed bubbles can travel all around the circle and that it is not composed of two half circles. Okay, so they're referring to this structure and these. The interesting thing is that if you look at this structure here, what do you see? You see two spots in the center. Is this important? Let's find out. Where does this come from? Let me show you where that comes from. And it comes from this paper here, which is Bubble Structures in Acoustic Cavitation by Robert Metin. And this is Drittes Physikalisches Institut, Universität Göttingen in Germany. And there's a number of papers that they've done. I think this is a good one because it's kind of like a summary of many things that they found. But things like these streamers, these kind of spiders structures, and we saw all these in ultra experiments, these kind of structures they call double layer structure from side and from top scattered light. So they're using side lighting and the bubbles are revealing it, or that's what they're thinking they are. And again, you have these structures. Now the interesting nature of this looks extremely like the structures where Ken Shoulders had a foil, and it looks like the thing that produced an exotic vacuum object from the center of this overall sort of structure. And they've got them in showing here how there's this process where bubbles get pulled together, and they've got some high-speed photography where they've done this. But what I want to refer to is not this vortical structure that comes off the end of the sonic horn. It is these structures here. Okay, so those are the structures, and we are going to look at those in more detail on the slide over here. Now, what I want you to look at for me is this weird thing that there seems to be something coming. Is it from above and down to there? Is it from below and up to here? Okay, and there is some spinning around here. How do we have something at this point and this point that's pulling this in and pulling this in, but as also this is throwing out something that's kind of like wants to go round and join up with this, and therefore it's forming this overall structure. In this, there's something even more interesting, and when you get the slides, you'll be able to maybe consider whether my hypothesis is correct or not. You can imagine that something like this is in the center of this, okay, here and here, and it's producing these kind of spiral things which look remarkably like what we saw, if you recall, at the center of how shall we put this, in the center of the abstract here. So this bit here, okay, and that we also saw on the Binjuan Huang copper sample. So you have a circle with a spiral arm and a spiral arm coming off at the center of this cone. So I will go back to presentation now. Okay, so again, a circular section with a spiral arm coming off and a spiral arm. But what's very interesting to me is, I don't know if you can see it, it almost looks like from the center of this thing, you have a vortical structure coming out. This spiral structure coming out, and that looks like it might be feeding into here. Don't know. This looks like it might be feeding into here, but really what you want to see is to capture this thing and be able to like do a bullet time and rotate around it like this to see if this is actually orthogonal. I suspect it's orthogonal, and I'm going to give my case for why I'm suspecting that now. So if you recall from Project Omar, we had these steel vibrator plates, and within the first, as soon as I got it, I put this on the window ledge and took some macro photography and observed all these cavitation spots on here. Which supported the notion that cavitation was going on, even though it was low frequency, but we did identify high frequency. So there's some resonant modes going on in here, okay? And when I took this home that evening and put it under the polarizing filter of the Dynalite edge, we saw this spiral coming out of the center of the spot, okay? So literally out of the center of this spot, out dead on the center, you have this spiral structure coming out, and it looks like it's going into the center of another spot up here. It like terminates here, and there's a black area over here, there's a black area over here, and it's coming out of the center. So what I'm suggesting is that something similar is going on here. You have the vortical thing, and I've also shown scanning electron microscopy of these steel plates where you literally see this round bit with the two spiral arms coming out from that round bit. So I believe that the exact same thing is going on, and that out of it you are getting this spiral thing that kind of feeds into the other one. So I do believe that that is what is going on there, and this is the first, in my view, strange radiation track coming out of the core of here. And I believe because it's coherent matter, it interacts with the steel in a way. Now, saying it's coherent matter, this coherent matter is this Geon, is this fractal toroidal cluster, and this has this torsion, rather, let's call it toroidal moment, for those getting excited about torsion, toroidal moment, and the toroidal moment is influencing the matter, and it's influencing it like that. It has no, it doesn't work on electro and magnetic fields. It's instantaneously reorganizing this matter. Remember what I said about this. This is not melted. This, in my view, is the toroidal moments interacting with the electrons in there and effectively breaking up the crystal structure. It's not a thermal process. The same thing is going on with John Hutchison metals. The same thing is going on when we are looking at things that are going on the Vega Valley and this half Vega Valley over here. It's all the same thing. Okay, so it's this instantaneous interaction with the matter. Okay, right. Those spiral patterns look like those produced by Winston Bostick. Yes, they do. Okay. So here is also some other of these cavitation spots on the samples by Amaza, Royston Amaza, and also when you can see it. Sorry, when you can see it. So we've got these one here that I was referring to. It's coming out of the center, going over, and we've got this spiral structure coming out of the center here. If we go here, these are your two that have come close together. So you can imagine that there's some sort of phallico-soliton going on between these. But we also saw this toroidal cluster, which definitely looks like it's not the same thing as the surrounding environment. And it's kind of crashed into the surface here. A bit of it's broken up here, and it's kind of got a bit of twisted and gnarly as it's come to its demise. This one looks like it's impacted directly to the center and it's broken up. And so you get the fragments around the outside. So this is, you know, quite interesting that you're seeing these same patterns over various things. Now, at the next slide, I haven't put the data in there because I was messing around with the internet for so long. So, and I don't know whether I want to put it in there at this point. So I'm going to just skip that and drop it to the end because we can discuss that at the end. Okay. All right. So I want to return to the first thing that looked a bit like a spiral arm galaxy that I saw on the Lion reactor, and see what this would do if we kind of like assumed that this was, this I believe is definitely magneto-hydrodynamic self-organized cluster. So it is a toroid which has two toroids on it. This will be important when we look at the tungsten chop shop from the Vega experiments. Okay, so this is a hydrodynamic structure, but I have argued, and I will argue further today, that this is a magneto-hydrodynamic structure. Okay, so if we go to the next slide here, what I've done is I've taken this and I've flipped it and just rotated it a bit, and that's what we have in the center of the slide here. So that flipped and rotated is what we have in the center of the slide here. Now, I'm aligning that with this, so you can see I'm aligning those two together. This is our spiral arm galaxy here. And here I've overlaid the two, okay? So what we have is we have a ring with two arms coming off it and two spots in the center, okay? Here, and note that this is a bigger spot than that one, okay? It might be perspective, it might just be something floating around, but we have one spot that's bigger and one spot is smaller. We can see this all over these things. There's a bigger spot and a smaller spot, a bigger spot and a smaller spot. These are basically exactly the same, but often we see this bigger spot, smaller spot, and I believe this is the one that's actually, it's coming from here and going down to here. Actually, that's how it works. It's coming from the smaller one going to the bigger one. Okay, so I believe that this is probably coming from the smaller one and to the bigger one, but it is a hole. This is a hole like we saw a hole in the center of in my view, elsewhere in this experiment here in the crusty, sort of glassy-like copper oxide. And I believe it's because of the toroidal moment that took that spirally type section out of the center, similar to this. Okay, so trying to build the argument here. Okay, so this is that, and so we have it there overlaid with the two spots kind of lining up with that, right? Now, why am I focusing on these two spots? Well, could it be that I am suggesting that these two spots are also what's causing these helical patterns, which often are one thing running around each other? We've seen this before, haven't we? We've seen this here, one thing running around each other in the plasma here. Now, it's a charge separation thing. I argued that maybe this is a cluster of electrons and this is a cluster of protons. Charge separation. You have minus is the negative charge, plus is the positive charge. Minus has a spin minus half. The proton has a spin plus a half. I think I've given the game away there, but think on that point for the minute whilst we go back. Oh dear, oh, loving this. Okay, so we have our match up here between those two structures. Right, let's do this again here. And what I've done is I've again reflected and rotated the bubble structure slightly differently. Okay, and I'm going to show you here. Oh, what am I saying? Reflected and rotated bubble structure. So I've basically done this. This was the first one. Lined it up, and when you line it up, actually, this thing here comes out and points over here. This thing here comes out and points over here. And only when these things are in alignment do you get these two spots aligning with this. I did no distortion. I just took the image and arranged it over here. But only when you have this point here going that way, in alignment with this, and this in alignment with this, do you get these two spots aligning with the center or slightly the inner side of these two structures over here. But let's do the same here. We have the reflected and rotated bubble structure, slightly different reflection, slightly different scale. I've zoomed in a little bit to the center of our phantom galaxy from this latest image here. And what happens? When we overlay this, it's so unbelievably striking. The brighter of the two spots aligns exactly with this bright structure here. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. But I think that might be something similar to what's going on in that experiment by SV Adamenko. There's something over here. Now, one is bright and one is dark. As I said, when the plasmas are rotating around each other, sometimes you only see things when they're coming towards you. If they're going away, you don't see it. If it's coming towards you, you see it. If you don't, it's going away, right? So the other one you see that is white, okay? So we have our spiral galaxy, and here it is. Now, it's not just that this aligns up with the start of this spiral part of the galaxy, and this that starts with the spiral of this arm of the galaxy. It's also incredible that if I can get this in the right position, there's these two marks that come out at an angle. Okay, there's these two marks come out at an angle, and they precisely, or within a few parsecs, align with the structure that's coming out here. But this straight line is kind of like in the line of that, and that is over there. For me, Winston Bostick said that plasmoids explain potentially everything from subatomic structures all the way up to galaxy formation. And I'm arguing that this is a magnetohydrodynamic gravitic structure, and that the gravitic moment is coming through this central line that we're looking down the line of. Okay? This is the bar of the galaxy. This is the bar of our structure. This thing is existing in here, in this line experiment. It is what's causing these two orbiting structures to come out here. One is positive, one is negative. That is what I am saying we are seeing is down here. Positive and negative structure in this. Doesn't care, and we'll look at this later. Remember what I said. These structures do not care about where the electrode is. They're not interested in an electric field, and they're not particularly interested in a magnetic field, although they can do. It depends on their clustering. But they're not interested in the electric field. What they are interested in are each other. And I hypothesized that these were looking forward in time because the other ones moved around them. And I'm saying that it fired out some sort of beam from the structure moving forward that manipulated the ether. And I specifically argued, if you go back to the videos, that it was causing a torsion in forward-looking in the relic neutrino flux or axions or something that are in front of that caused this spin field that then caught up this structure as it was moving. So we will go step through the frames, and you will see that these things are interacting in a way where the one that's moving around it is predicting where this will be. And the only way I could explain that was because it was sending something out in front of it faster than it was traveling. Maybe incredible kinds of speeds that were interacting in a torsion way in this toroidal field, as we now call it, this toroidal moment rather. And I believe that this is exactly what's going on in here. Okay? So, I think at this point I'm going to talk about some points about gravity. Now, one I included into the description of this, and it was Matsumoto's 1990 gravitational collapse of matter and Matsumoto's 1991 peaked patterns. Okay? So, if you've got your steps to the discovery of electronuclear collapse, you can follow along with me. I will bring the slides up on the presentation here in a second. What I want you to go to first is after he demonstrated the disappearance of material in his deuterated palladium rod in what he eventually called ball lightning consummation. Okay, so I would go to pages firstly, in 1991, this was received September the 13th, 1990, on page 117. He's talking about observation of quad neutrons and gravity decay during cold fusion. Now, I have the original Japanese book somewhere around here, if I can find it. Maybe I don't. Easy to hand. I don't know whether I had it easy to hand. No, I don't have it easy to hand. But anyway, he thought it was quad neutrons originally, but by 2001 he accepted that it could be millions, if not billions, of atoms that are simultaneously being collapsed. Okay, so that's the first one. So he's saying it's gravity collapse, and if you read this book, it says gravity collapse many, many, many times. He's not saying it's something else than that. It is that's what he's saying. It's caused by. Okay, and note his diagram for how this occurs, which we discussed in the last presentation, is this. You have a toroidal structure that forces things into a point, and the point at the center of that is the point of electronuclear collapse. That, in my view, is the center of this cone that is the toroidal moment that causes the collapse of matter. Okay, so we need to go on to page thing, and I will actually bring these images up on the stream. So you need to go to page. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Now, in his palladium, he sees these. Look at this. Butterfly structures, right? There's a thing going off this way, which is going round at that. Oh, sorry, I'll do it this way. It's going round at that way, and this one's going off at that way. So this is a bar spiral, but this is in, I think this is in palladium deuteroid. Yeah, palladium rod. Yeah. So this is in this is in a piece of palladium that's been exposed with deuterium, and you actually have this central circular area, and then which is removed, and then you have the spiral arm going out that way and a spiral arm down that way. This is what Solin calls a gravimagnetic rotor in local zones. I think it's called it. He calls it. What's it called? Yeah, I think it's that. What does he call it? Yeah. Something like that. Gravimagnetic rotors in local zones. So this is your. It's literally like a rotor on a plane, isn't it? With your two fins and so on. So yeah, I believe that this is the same thing, but this is going on in the side a piece of palladium, right? It's all the same thing. Okay. So this paper I want you to look at is interference phenomena observed during cold fusion. So this is on page 130, and this is the interference phenomena of waves observed during the cold fusion experiment are described. Nuclear emulsions have successfully recorded two different interference phenomena of waves from an electrolyzing cell. It is inferred that the waves might be gravitational and anti-gravitational waves. Anti-gravitational waves. Gravitational waves. Yin-yang. One makes, one breaks. Which could be expected to be radiated from gravity decays of quad neutrons. Okay? And so I will pull up the PDF of this. Okay? And then we'll be able to look at it on the thing here. So let me just get that. And we'll go here, and we will go steps to the discovery of electronuclear collapse, and I will type in interference. Okay. Is this where I want to be? No. Yes, okay, so I've got the right paper here. So, interference phenomena observed during cold fusion. Okay. And so here are the interference for case C and for case B. Now, I want you to look at this. In this interference pattern, we have a triangular structure which has a spot at the top. Okay? And what does he refer to this figure 3? Where is it? Figure 3, figure 3. Is it talked about here or here? Let's look for... somewhere here. In figure 3, the three neighbouring peaked patterns might be caused by refractions at the three boundaries: water, the glass of the cell, blah blah blah. 3 or 4 peaked pattern groups might be caused by the position of palladium rod, which was slightly changed 2 or 3 times during the electrolyzing experiment in order to polish the surface of the palladium metal. To verify these situations, an additional experiment was done in which the nuclear emulsions were located at the opposite side. Figure 6 shows similar peaked patterns for this experiment. We have only one group for the upper and lower patterns. Moreover, the upper and lower groups. Anyway, the point being is it's not very clear here, but he has these triangular structures here. These triangular structures here. And I believe that he observed this this toroidal moment here from a monopole. And in terms of X-rays, we know that the birdies themselves produce this sort of like conical bit going into a bird kind of thing. Shishkin describes that as moving the electrons. That is what I am saying is going on here. It's moving the electrons. It's not melting the material, it's moving the electrons. It's non-thermal interaction with this material that would normally melt at 1700 plus degrees centigrade. Okay, so I believe he's seen it there, but we've actually seen something similar by Matsumoto in what he literally calls black holes. So we will find that, and I showed the exact same structure on the Hutchison fracture sample. So we'll go here, no, previous. Give me a second. Okay, just looking at what I showed you earlier on the quartz, this is what he observed, this structure in 1993 with these segments around the outside. Okay, one might consider this to be a white hole one because it's not damaged the surface. Okay. Okay, so here we go. These are his so-called black holes. And they have these triangular sections going to a point. Triangular section going to a point. This one's maybe slightly off at a distorted angle. There's something down here. He says this is a... This literally has... Look at this. I kind of like this one. It's one of my favorite ones because it kind of like... It has, like we just saw on our Lion reactor here, you have something in the center and the toroid around the outside. So if I go back to here, this hole in the center with the toroid around the outside, yeah, and then something either going in or out. He says that this is like a black and a white hole joined together. Okay, so this is like one circle and another circle, and this is how the matter is flowing between them. That's his view, and I'm not necessarily going to argue with it. He has a couple, is it down here? He has some other ones which are really quite spectacular. Is it down here? Okay, all right. I'll go and find it first. Yeah, it's these ones here. And this particular one, where you have this point coming down here and it's coming out with this cone shape, this is almost identical to the 3D structure that was captured on the Hutchison effect fracture sample. Again, if you look down here, you have this point here, this point, and it's coming out. And note, it's more intense on the outside, and you can imagine that this is the toroidal moment. Now, if one is a black hole and one is a white hole, and they act in a similar way, one is pulling stuff in and throwing it out, and another one is you know, and is it tearing something apart, and is it putting it together? And is it that one has one chirality and the other one has the other chirality, and one assembles matter by pulling things into a certain chirality, another one disassembles matter by having the opposite chirality, and that's the gravity and the anti-gravity waves that are being emitted. Anyway, I believe that is kind of what's coming out of the core of these structures, and I think that if we start with the argument of John Archibald, we learnt that these are this is the case, then I think we're on to a safe bet to explain what we are seeing here, 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 the structures that we see on here, these structures that we see on here, what the damage is, why we see these things, why they are able to interact in a pretty magical way, and so forth. And that is that. Right, so that's Matsumoto and Matsumoto's peaked patterns. Now, in Solin's work, his patent, this is the key phrase from it, which I will talk about here. So this is on gravity. It says, Solin, active centers, the shells of which consist of superconducting nuclear condensate, rotate. They have a magnetic and gravitational field. Thus, active centers perform the functions of gravimagnetic rotors in local zones. Slightly further on, the interference pattern of wave superposition is clearly observed. The structure in the form of petals with radial symmetry is a characteristic sign of the formation of a magnetic fluid. Magnetic Hydrodynamics 1980, number 3, page 15 to 30. So that's the reference, and that's the magnetic fluid, and that's what will produce these radial structures. The formation of ellipsoidal concentric waves is associated with the deformation of magnetosonic waves under the action of elliptically polarized gravitational waves. So you've got gravitational waves here. The magnetosonic waves, he's basically describing strange radiation, and he was the first person to publish this kind of radiation in his 1992 patent. Okay, so they're saying that it's basically coming from this. He's talking about these superconducting structures, and that is what you get in these structures. This is a wave forming a petal condensate. This is what he is referring to here. This is the structure around the outside, which is our bead chain, Each one of these is its own torus, which is a fractal torus in its own right, making a larger fractal torus, which creates this vortex structure and the yin-yang in the center. It's fractal, and it goes on and it goes on. And that is why he saw in his experiment here the center point having this glow and whatever, and in a different area, in other areas, they saw these areas around the outside that were doing the same thing. They would fire the ions in, they would disappear, but if they turned off the photomultiplier, they would see this thing decaying exponentially. So that is why we have these structures here. That is the same thing. You've got something going on in the center, but each of these would have something in. And if you had a gap between them, it wouldn't be flowing all the way around. It would be, presenting itself in a slightly different way. Okay, so I believe, before I go on and just do a little bit more delving in, and I draw you my diagram for how I believe the ultra experiment works, I just want to clarify a couple of other points. One, when we did our extreme interactions here thing, you will recall there's these three structures that come together here. And the sequence of events is, firstly, you have these other structures over here that look exactly like ball lightning photography. So this is a natural ball lightning. I think Bitchkoff has it in his work. But you see these kinks here, these kinks here, these kinks. And this is the same kinks that we see on this. The kink here, kink here. Okay? All right. If we go here, we saw this structure. It comes out. It goes round. It bounces off. It turns round the other way. It comes round this way, comes round, and this one comes out. And it gets to within this area and it starts to orbit around it. And then another one is coming out here and it orbits around that. I believe that this one is already starting to orbit around this torsion moment, this toroidal moment that's projecting out in front of this. Okay? And then this one comes out in a straight line, but it instantaneously wraps around this one because of these paired toroidal moments. And it comes along here, but they're not sufficient enough to stay clustered and they fall apart. But there's this wonderful one that comes up from up here, and it sees one of these, which is the biggest one, the one that started, I believe. and it comes around here, and as it comes to here, this one does a 180-degree orbit around it, 180-degree orbit, and then it starts following it, but in the counter rotation. Okay, so it is breathtaking how the sphere of influence around this thing, and how it's manipulating something that is not a magnetic field, not an electric field. It is, I believe, this toroidal moment, and this is, you're seeing this attempt of these various particles to get and join together. Now, in this one, which I believe I've got the video here, so I might be able to... No, I don't. Do I have the video? Let me see if I can get that video. It might just be the still, actually. Maybe it's the still. Yeah, it's just the still. Okay. Well, you can go and see me talking about it in extreme reactions, interactions. But the point being here is that we have about 4 or 5 frames in this, and so for instance, this one comes up here, and this little gap here is where the frame breaks. This one comes up here, and what's happening is this is coming around here, and it sends a beam out in front of it, okay? And this one comes up, and it sees this beam, and it changes its direction and orbits around it. But this being here itself influences this one to come back, and when it comes back on itself, this orbit bends away in a different direction. This one is coming along here, and before this is able to meet it, it already all kinks round and goes round and gets destabilized by it. So this particular series of frames from David Boutilier's work is just unbelievably informative about how these working. Now, I did a sequence of images from my time with Henk Uren recently, and this is one of them. And we were using this Sony A1, and it produces in the digital raw images, it produces 14 bits or per RGB of dynamic range, and that enables us to, and this is the reason the camera was bought. It was the only thing that would give us that resolution, that control over all of the specifics of the camera, and with a good lens we were able to look at the plasma and then be able to pull out from what's in the plasma what is going on. And in this one we see 2 spots. It looks like one explosion, but it's not. It's 2 spots. And you can see that it also has some substructure in there, and it looks like one is interacting with the other. There's a bit of a tail coming in and coming into this one. And I showed another one where there was 2 spots on one side and 2 spots on the other. And I believe that is functionally equivalent to the one that we saw right at the start in the bubble structures, where you've got this kind of thing. You've got 2 spots and 2 spots, okay? These are fractal structures, and they work in plasma. They work in this, which is, plasma is a magneto-hydrodynamic structure. This is also a magneto-hydrodynamic structure in here. Now, this is very, very important. The other thing that I want to talk about, these these 2 points, I need to pull up the video because it shows what I want to get across here, and then I will show you my conclusion drawing after a little bit of fun. So so I will I need to go here, and I need to go here, and I need to go. Nope. Now I'm not going to be able to find the video, am I? Oh dear. I can describe it for those people that have seen it, but maybe some others won't believe it. Give me a second. Okay. Nearly there. Apologies for those that had to suffer this. Okay. Suffer the issues earlier. So if you recall, this is what I called the tungsten chop shop. Thank you to Henk Uren for this. And what happened is, this ball came round, and what happened was on the other side of this ring of the anode tungsten wire, another resonant bloom occurred on the other side. Okay? And I believe that this is our two spots, if you know what I mean. But it doesn't occur until it gets into a point where everything is in equilibrium. Okay, so I believe that, you know, this is a complete positive and negative. And I spoke about, how should we put this? Give me a second. Other example. No, I'm gonna skip that. But basically, you get these kind of two and then two in, and then two in. And why am I interested in this? Well, I will refer back again to this, which was in my Sochi presentation. And this was the Arecibo telescope that sent out a message. And it looked like this, and this was the response that we got back, and it looked like this, and it was by the Chilbolton Observatory, but a year before it had this structure, and it was this ring with a spot, and I said that that was the fundamental structure, and then around that you have a ring, which is the ring, if you can imagine it, orthogonal at 90 degrees to this, and this is at 90 degrees to that, and it's showing this fractal structure. And it's the simplest form of the fractal structure. It's the spiral arm galaxy. But you need to have two to start scaling this thing. You can have three, you can have four at this level, but you need to have at least a minimum at each fractal level. Okay? So does that make sense? Okay. And this is kind of what I'm saying is happening at that tungsten chop shop. It needs to get to that resonant sense to have three. Okay, so there's one last point, and this is absolutely critical because it kind of connects these things two together. So we started off by talking about the kind of like this is about the ultra experiment, but we started talking about at one point the Mars vibrator plates, and how out of the center of those Mars vibrator plates we had a spiral thing that looked like ball lightning with these two things rotating around each other around the common center, but you kind of sometimes only see one side of it, so it looks a bit weird. And I kind of explained that I believe that one side is positive, one side is negative. It's the charge separation that's going on. I believe that when we look again at what's going on with what we showed in the last presentation with the copper on the metal with the gap like that with the thing going through, one is a kind of like an electron cluster, another one is a positive thing cluster, which could be positrons, or it could be actually protons, because they are half positive and the other one's half negative spin, and they would kind of like, it seems a bit weird, but often one seems a little bit bigger in those circumstances. What we know is that when you put hydrogen into the Vega experiment, you immediately see these balls forming. And now I've remembered what I wanted to show you. Okay, so because it's relevant to what I'm trying to get across here, and it is in Vega, and that's why I couldn't see it with my puny brain. What are we looking at here? It's Vega, this one, I think. So yes. So this is some serious things in the Vega experiment. Okay. Right. And what we see here, this is a full ball on the part here, and that's kind of the theory here. These are balls self-organizing. But if you recall, I asked many moons ago, what are these two spots on these structures? And I believe that these could be the self-balancing structure that's going on, and that these are interacting. And you could imagine that these are like this, where you have one side and one the other, but it actually has a much shorter piece of twisty, felty stuff in between, like this. So actually, I'm going to make it up here now. This is my demonstration. It's kind of like more like this, like that. Okay, so what you're seeing on this with those two spots are kind of something like that, or maybe something like that, right? Okay, and you've got a lot of electrons and ions flying around, but that is what one is the positive spin thing, and one is the negative. And given the fact that you put hydrogen in there, it could be that the hydrogen is ionized, and you get protons, which are half positive spin, and you get electrons, which are half negative spin, and the two form that ball, and with those highlighted spots. And that is kind of it. There we go. That's that done. Right. Yeah, I don't think I want to say anything more there. Tungsten chop shop. Okay, all right. So, what I'm now going to do is over here, somewhere over there, I have a pad or paper where I have drawn something which I believe potentially is what's going on. But before I do that, I need to show a couple of things. No, I'm gonna do the Shishkin thing first. I have to do the Shishkin first, right? So Shishkin, if you recall, he had, and I'm going to be translating all of his work after the Russian conference. That's my plan. He's given me permission to do that. So he was tasked with making a processor to produce an emulsion of oil and water. And how he chose to do that was he created two discs, but the discs had grooves and slots and so on, and they went round like that, and they produced vast amounts of cavitation. But this was to efficiently mix the oil and water into this emulsion. Okay, he had a little motor driving that, and it was going around at a few thousand RPM or hundreds of RPM. What he found was when he was near that device, it made him feel really physically ill. And so he thought, well, I can do radiation. So he put some X-ray film on there, and he saw these birdies for the first time. We're going to go to that paper. But what I've pointed out to here is that the cavitation leading to cold neutrino condensate, okay, that's what he calls it. And necessarily it requires gravity to capture, necessarily requires gravity capture of neutrinos as only affected by weak force and gravity. Okay, so what this toroidal moment is allowing you to do, according to this data, is to capture neutrinos, cold neutrinos, okay, from the cosmos. Okay, so we are pulling in Parkhomov here with Shishkin and taking the Dubovit work, all of these things that you've seen, these triangle structures that you've seen, these vortical structures and these toroidal structures, bringing all of these things together. This is gravity modification. That's what it is. It is gravity decay of nuclear matter. It's gravity assembly of nuclear matter. This is the God's toolbox. This is the end. This is literally it. So there's two points that I need to do here. I need to do the Shishkin paper, and I need to do the introduction to Space Earth Human. So I need to go and get that video for you so that it makes sense. So first, just let me note down what I have to do in order, because I would have done this earlier, but a new form of penetrating radiation. Okay, you can go and have a look at these. I'll include these videos into the references for this, of course, but some of you will have seen them before. Right, so okay, so so firstly, I'm going to go to the introduction video to Space Earth Human. And I might just play that through so I don't have to go over it exactly again. And I'll go through the Shishkin work. Like I say, essentially what I'm doing right now is I'm just running through my thoughts for what I want to present in Assisi to explain this. But the ultra experiment, I believe, 100% does this. We can completely explain why radiation remediation occurs with what I'm going to talk about next week. It will be very, very trivial, and we've essentially done most of the key aspects of these technologies, and everything else just follows. It's kind of like, you're now skilled in the art. Okay, all right. So we need to go here and YouTube Studio, and okay, that's just what we'll do. We go there, we'll go like that, we'll go like that over there. Okay, get rid of that. Okay. Okay, done. Okay, right. So these are the videos you'll need to review. We'll go there for that, and we'll go boom. I'm just going to play this one through anyway. Okay, all right. So I'll try and pick up the audio from this. Okay.
In connections between the cosmos and man. If you are interested in connections between the cosmos and man, or in ways to tap the unlimited sea of energy in which we live, then please help enable the English translation of this Russian book, Space, Earth, Human, by scientist Dr. Alexander Parkhomov. My name is Bob Greenier. Since 2012, I have been supported by
I was a lot younger then.
Community of wonderful people just like you to volunteer for the open, not-for-profit Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. Scientists across the world are waking up to the role that neutrinos might play in how everything in our reality works, and how they may enable the next chapter in our history.
Okay, so I'm going to wind that back because those are the key papers that you need to read to understand this. So, okay, so, come on. Right, so total reflection of relic neutrinos from material targets. Okay, that is one thing, right? So if relic neutrinos can be totally reflected, then it is potential that clusters of relic neutrinos can be reflected, even if you synthesize them or you capture those larger clusters. So that is important. This is why I believe that Parkhomov had these soft iron reflectors, whether they be a parabolic dish towards a beta isotope target, or whether on his reactors he would typically have a piece of reflecting material around it. So these can, this is this paper that kind of explains the science behind that. This one is from Bob McElrath, and he's from the CERN theory group, and I think this is in 2008 or 2010, sometime around there. And this is the question I ask here is, are low energy relic neutrinos the cause of gravity? And he concludes that he says cosmic background neutrinos must exist. This is the relic neutrinos They are a superfluid, and their self-interactions are a gravitational theory. These dynamics arise in the standard model, which is a renormalizable quantum field theory. We suggest that this may actually be the gravity that we observe. Okay, so they're saying that because of relic neutrinos, that could be the cause of gravity. Okay, and then let's go on a little bit further. Where we go? Okay, so there was some other papers in there. It might be that it's just not capturing them. Let me see. That one. Okay. All right. So, do low energy relic neutrinos stimulate beta decay? And there is all this data from these independent authors that suggest that it does. Okay. Electroweak gravity. Can low-energy neutrino condensates explain the lack of photon emissions in the new fire? And it's talking about things that are a bit weird and about the de Broglie wavelength. So I would suggest you go and have a look at that. And he's saying that it's a thing that spans across the whole cosmos, and it's one coherent condensate. This is available in every point in the universe. So we go along here, and I'm going to show you... which one do I want to show you? Okay, I recommend you go and see this. This image is very, very important here. And I specifically chose this all those moons ago for this reason. This is a dual EVO strike going through lead glass. Now you can see they're kind of overlaid, but you have an outie and an innie, an outie and an innie. I think this is exactly what we're seeing in our own work, but it's two, right? This again, he calls it a single strike, but I believe this is still a composite. I don't know if you can see it, but there's kind of like a dimple here, like a butt crack, if you might want to call it that. And this still looks like there's an outie and an innie here. They're just more like horn torus rather than a torus. This is a horn torus. This is a torus, okay, with the sloshing involved, and it's because of the electromagnetic phantom that's coming through the material that interacts with the electrons and just turns it into a glassy state, and it basically does it instantaneously. Again here with this dual EVO coming through, it's spiraling around each other. This is the same thing we see over and over, whatever system you're looking at here. And this is our friend Matsumoto here. And so this is incredibly important. I spent a long time with this author here. This was between 1987 and 1999. Xu Wenju found that during Sun, Moon, and Earth alignments, an unusual force of horizontal oscillation takes place. Okay, and crystals they kind of like form these linear arrays, which is almost like a gravity reaction, a refraction pattern in itself, but recorded in crystals. Lead tin alloy, the spectral waves, the lengths of the atoms, and blah blah blah. What he noticed here was that in fact I've got a thing here when it comes up. Like I say, I encourage you to go and look at this. The spectral wavelengths of atoms or molecules and the speed rate of atomic clocks. So it alters atomic clocks. But also he found that with this brass sheet, and it's important that it's brass, and you'll find out next week, it's brass sheet. There's, in the three-body alignment, I hypothesize that there's this denser flux of relic neutrinos on the outside because they can be reflected by dense matter. They're gravitationally lensed because these are a type of neutrinos. They can only be affected by the weak force and gravity, and that they diffuse in from the outside. Okay, they diffuse in from the outside, and that is pushing. Therefore, in my view, gravity is caused by relic neutrino condensates. This pervades the whole universe, and it is a push force of gravity. And the gravitational well is the fact that the matter inside the Earth is growing, and we are growing, life is growing. We absorb this thing and we capture it. And by capturing it, you produce a lower pressure zone. That is your gravitational well. Okay. Yes, Dave's talking about his copper. It's very important. So, Now I'm going to go to this, a new type of penetrating radiation by Alexander Shishkin, and basically he's saying that there was a type of radiation that the discoverer of characteristic X-rays found, and that he couldn't explain it, and he spent the rest of his life trying to explain it. He called it J radiation. We've spoken about this in the past. Other authors tried. Also, Martin Fleischmann and spoke about this in his interview with Christopher P. Tinsley in 1996 in Infinite Energy. And he said that Gozzi has observed them to over 120 keV. And so forth there. And in this same interview, the only bit that seems to be cut is a discussion around gravity, which he says there were 4 things we're investigating. He discusses 3 of them and he avoids discussing 1. Which is the point where he's avoiding talking about gravity. Okay, that's as far as you can read from that interview. Okay, so this Russian physicist Simon E. Schnoll, he looked at 200 papers spanning from 1951 to 2008, and he decided there was a common cosmophysical agent that was actively influencing virtually all processes that were random or occurring on Earth and in space. And if time is defined by the change of things, and the thing that causes all of these processes, cell division and radioactive decay, if all of these things are caused by a common factor, and those are the things by which you perceive time, then is time caused by this common factor? And if the common factor is relative neutrino flux, then time will change if you have less or more of that flux. Certainly, it would appear that it changes the rate of beta isotopes, and if you have an atomic clock, physically, you have a change in the time recorded by that clock relative to ones that have a different relative neutrino flux. Okay? So with this magnetotoroelectrical radiation, he gives credit to Ken Shoulders, and you can see here he gives credit to Ken Shoulders and says that this basically is it. Magnetotoroelectrical, the radiation is when it's coming out, but magnetotoroelectrical clusters are what it calls exotic vacuum objects. And it is a precise name, and you have to remember that Shishkin worked at Dubna and did all of this research on this magnetotoroelectrical clusters at Dubna. And Dubna is where Dubovik did his thesis in 1965 and published his thesis, which explained and completed electrodynamics, talking about this toroidal moment, which is different from the electric field and the magnetic field. Okay, so he's calling this the correct name, and now I understand why it's the correct name. And so he calls the neutral form the string vortex solitons. And I didn't really know what this string vortex soliton meant. Is it that there is a vortex that's going around in a string? And I thought, well, maybe not. Now, I think that probably it is a vortex soliton, but the string is the vortex, which is this torsional, this toroidal moment that can come in a string, and the material's pulled in a string. And you see that on some of the things that I showed you earlier, where you have a spiral of things that are coming in, and it literally writes a string. Like in the spiral in the Suhas-Ralkar electric discharge experiment, and in the Vega Valley, you see this string. It's like someone's put a string in a spiral. So I think it's an extremely precise name, and he knows exactly what it is, and it's not surprising. And that's an advert, so we'll skip that. Oh no, we're getting the music as well. We're going to skip that, right? Sorry, back in the room in a sec. Okay, so what they did was these string vortex solitons can carry ions depending on what gases they put them through, and the pits they could determine were a specific dimension, width and depth based on the atoms that they went through. And they could produce them from a hydrodynamic generator, which is what he produced them with. But you can also produce them from cavitation, which is what that was doing, which is what we're doing in Ultra. From revolving bodies, this is things that just move very fast. They can produce it. From materials irradiated with gamma radiation, from these two, which are also gamma radiation sources, by applying a high voltage pulse on this from a reactor producing corona stream of discharge, okay, and you know, that would be, I don't know, a Tesla coil or a plasma ball. From generators Spillman and Shakhparinoff. I don't really know those, but let's just assume they are. Now, there's something very important that he was saying, right? So he actually, let me just get to the point where he says that they are, where is it? Okay, so he talks about the radiation risk. A string vortex soliton is an ordered vortex structure of cold neutrinos, since the interaction of string vortex soliton with radioactive isotopes changes the decay characteristics of these isotopes. What I am saying, and I spoke to something that he said off the record, he had this cavitation device, and it was producing these birdies on the X-rays, these string vortex solitons. And then he found after a while it didn't produce it anymore. And he found the only way he could get them to produce it is he had to lift it up and move it to a different part of his lab, and then it would start to produce it again. Now, I have shown you in the extreme interactions in David Boutlier's experiment that these structures themselves, when they are clustering, they have a sphere of influence outside of which no effect occurs on things that are similar to it, because it's not electromagnetics that affect these things. It is only the torsional moment. And so if you become within the field of the torsional moment, i.e. you are to the side of the cone or you are in the beam of the cone, you can be pulled in. But if you're outside of that area, you will stay where you are. These things are quantum locked, right? They diffuse, they can be moved by gravity, but this extreme gravity that is produced, these gravity beams that are produced by these structures, akin to the Geons of John Archibald Wheeler, that we are seeing, that I believe it is this gravitational thing that we are talking about in Matsumoto's book, that we're talking about in Solin's patent. He's specifically calling it this. These solitons produce these gravitomagnetic rotors in local zones, okay? He's exactly saying what it is. This is able to pull this material in, and then you need a certain amount of these things in the center of your electromagnetic phantom to produce the strange radiation, the string vortex solitons that can fly out and that are neutral. They may be the same thing, but I actually think it's the thing in the center, because we see from these vortical structures in the various experiments we've been looking at today, that something really special happens in the center. So I'm showing you an ultrasonic system. This ultrasonic system is able to produce this strange radiation that can be observed at a distance. It was also observed in exploding titanium foils. I guess it was immediately producing HHO. You get charge separation, you get clustering because you've got vortices going on within that water. That causes a self-organization, the clustering and so forth. These things are produced and they get kicked out. And it's all done in a blink of an eye. Okay, so and he's saying it is cold neutrinos. Cold neutrinos, I want to reiterate this, they cannot be interacted with directly by electromagnetic waves, right? Weak force or gravity. Those are your choices. So if you are forming a toroid of these things, of cold neutrinos, you have to have been able to produce gravitational beam, field, event horizon, whatever you like to call it. You necessarily have to have done that. That means that what Wheeler said we are creating a coherent wave function that is our fractal toroidal cluster. He draws a simple one, but he actually in that same paper refers to wormholes and black holes. That is not a coincidence. It is not a coincidence. But he doesn't realize this toroidal moment. The toroidal moment comes with Dubovik in 1965. Okay, so how with everything that I've said today, I'll just show you a couple of key slides again, just to drum this home, okay? Okay. We have our thing here. We have our spiral galaxies here. We have our spiral thing in Matsumoto's work. We have a thing that is able to act a bit like a black hole in Adamenko's work, right? We have something that has material eaten out in the spiral thing with your typical carbon that's formed in the toroidal structure, and I believe it's something going on like this, and the center bit has the shape of this. I believe that this toroidal kind of thing, there is an electromagnetic phantom potentially around this, and it produces these structures, and end on you get the triangles formed, okay, because of the toroidal moment of the interaction with the material, and it affects differently brass because of a certain specific thing that I'm going to talk about next week, about the nature of copper and zinc and aluminium, and it affects very, very differently iron and silicon dioxide and stuff, and so that's why you see these things. And it is a gravitational beam. It produces, as Wheeler said, it's bound together by the gravity, but this is effectively a large de Broglie wavelength, and what you are looking at here, Ken Shoulder says it eats electrons, but it becomes an electron. He describes that what he is referring to is he's referring to a Cooper pair, a muon, a tauon, all having different numbers of electrons, but they're effectively still got only one negative charge. And what I believe that we are witnessing that are impacting these things that are very, very massive are effectively incredibly large things that are basically a very long-lived tauon, but much more vast, and it's stabilized in part, I believe, by the ions, and this is what Ken Shoulders did, and he chose mercury to stabilize them because it's heavy, but you still lose the mass and inertia in these structures. And so we have them here. This is with some ions being carried. We know they carry ions. That was shown by the team at Dubna, and it may even be the transmutation products. Is it doing something as it's traveling along? Probably, quite likely. Did it produce this carbon with material that it was carrying, or did it instantaneously produce the carbon, or did it just dump a payload? Those are questions to be answered. Here's a cluster. Here's a cluster. Here's an arrangement. So you can imagine this is this large electron, and it has these substructures, but effectively they form these toroids of toroids. This is what's going on in here, but you have the two spots in the middle, two spots in the middle. This, I believe, is where your coherent cluster of relic neutrinos is forming. This is where your coherent cluster of relic neutrinos is forming. But it's also formed in these, right? So the subtoroids captured them, and they can do funky things with matter, but the overall structure is starting to do funky things with matter, okay? Same here. Right, so these are the observables. So remember, we have a toroid here, okay? We got the two spots, and I went through the fact that we got the spiraling coming out of here, okay? That we have the toroid here, which is a toroid of toroids, and so on. And then I match these up here with the structure rotated from this work, which is cavitation at 23 kilohertz, and I overlaid it on here to show the two spots where the material's eaten out, and that only works if you have these arms lined up. And if you can imagine, this is a cone, but it's not a very big cone because it's coming from a very, very small thing. But when you actually look at this sample, I mean, this is 5 millimeters. Is it 5 millimeters? Maybe it's 5 millimeters on this scale, but whatever. This here is, you can imagine the cone, but it's not got a very large spread, okay? This might be the same kind of spread as the ones that are in David Boutlier's experiment, okay? And then we've got the same thing going on with the spiral galaxy. And it's not just this overall structure where the two spiral arms are born from with the bar, between the two, you actually have these bits coming out of the side. And it's exactly there, these bits coming out of the side. This is where the spiral arm is born. This is where the spiral arm is born. I believe you have one toroid here and another toroid here. This is a fractal structure. This is a fractal structure. They are the same thing that you see in that tungsten chop shop, where you get two coming together and that starts cohering matter in new ways and effectively creates this center. And the center is effectively a thing made of the thing that is gravity, if you know what I mean, that causes gravity, the relic neutrinos. And so it's a thing of great beauty, really. And so there we go. We've hit all our points there. So I'm going to now take you over to my drawing. I think that's everything I wanted to say. So I've got one image for those that weren't necessarily getting it, which I'll show first. Is it there? I've got it in the drawing. Okay, so we'll try this. I'm going to switch to here. So this is Adamenko and the iron eater. I'm going to turn it upside down. So essentially, what I'm saying is you've either got a full torus and it eats the ions in the center, or you've got tori that are grouped in together with a bead chain, and you end up with a number of these things that eat the ions around the outside. Okay, so that is that. Okay, but this is, for me, and I've got a lot more things to share on this, but this is just your basic shape. So what you have is, this is our bar spiral galaxy that we've been talking about. You've got a torus at 90 degrees and a torus at 90 degrees, and that makes your rotation. This produces your kind of like, you're a bit like that and you're a bit like that, which you see in the work by Matsumoto here in palladium and deuterium. That petal that he sees, that rotor, as is referred to by Solin. Which paper was that in? Oh, it's before the gravity decay. There we go. This one. Okay. This central hole and two things coming out, and they're sort of they're rotating like a petal, like that. Okay. And in there he sees transmutation. And what does he see in E? Let's look at what E has. E has, oh my god, it has sulfur and calcium. Of course it has calcium. It's got to have calcium, isn't it? It's Lena. All right. Okay, so we go back to this one. Okay, so that is the structure. We see that in all the experiments you bother to look at. Okay, right. Now, actually, I have to explain this. I've got to talk about two different aspects of water. And I've mentioned it before in brief, but I'm actually going to bring up two more papers. So there we go. Drawings, I love it. You're such an artist, Corky. That's fantastic. I love it. Drawings. Oh, I could dine on that for months. Right. Okay. So just to show that I wasn't first, this is definitely not first. This is Bostic and Nardi with his D4D rings. So these are kind of similar to the structures that was observed by Matsumoto and ourselves, and he calls them D4D rings. There we go. Okay. Right. Not that one. Okay. Right. So in cold fusion at the ICCFs, we have, and I thank Camilla Oberna for alerting me to this, we have what's called the preparata medal. So if someone does something very, very special for the cold fusion field, they can get a preparata medal. It's some sort of fund that he set up to give these. I think they're actually pure silver, or you can even get palladium ones maybe. But anyway, this guy was Università di Milano, Dipartimento di Fisica, for the Italian nuclear organization. So this was received 27th of January 1995. Okay, so this is very contemporary with the center of the work of many of the artists that I've been talking about today. So it is shown that when density becomes larger than critical density, and the ensemble of water molecules evolves towards a coherent ground state where molecules oscillate in phase with an EM field, at each temperature, liquid water is found to consist of a coherent phase of molecules in such ground state and of a normal phase whose population is determined by thermal excitations. The observed thermodynamical quantities, as well as their well-known anomalous behaviors, are satisfactorily described by our theory. And this theory is that basically water generally exists in two phases. Okay, and I won't go into everything, but essentially, maybe I've got a bookmark here. Yes, he's talking about the coherent fraction at various temperatures, and like when you get down to, what is it, a few minus 100 degrees or whatever, it's 273 would be here, so that's going to be about a minus 100 degrees. The whole water becomes coherent. But even if you are, what's that, 273 would be there, that would be 0 around here. You've even got a significant percentage of water, even at room temperature, that is in a coherent state. This is the coherent fraction of water. So already you're starting with a material that has this dipole structure in a coherent matter state. So you've already got onto a winner with water, okay? And I don't want to go into this too much, but here's this thing here. Okay, in which water molecules interact coherently with large classical electromagnetic field. The coherent phase is just built up by the collection of coherent domains that at a given temperature have survived the disordering attacks of the thermal fluctuations. In the coherent phase, due to the oscillations of water molecules between the ground state and excited state at 12.06 eV, the volume occupied by each molecule turns out to be definitely larger than the volume occupied by the blah, blah, blah. Okay, right, fine. You can go and read this in time, but it says here, liquid water has been found to consist, as well as all quantum electrodynamic coherent condensed matter systems at non-zero temperature of two distinct interspersed phases. Okay, and he says these phases are actually rather large. So we already are starting with a material that has large coherent domains within it. Okay, now what else does water have? Well, it has this potential, when you treat it in a certain way, to have what is called easy water. And basically, if you want to go and find out about easy water, it's called, there's this book called The Fourth Phase of Water, Beyond Solid, and it's by Gerald H. Pollack. Okay, but to cut a long story short, you have coherent matter already in the water existing. Secondly, you have this potential where you have an interface boundary of producing some charge separation. Now I'll go back to my diagram. Right, okay, here we are. So I've drawn this before, where we have in our top and our bottom, we have toroids, okay? Now, we know from looking at the peak of this thing, okay, that there are two structures which might be themselves toroids, which creates themselves, if it's a toroid like that, there's the flow going around it, right, that would be in this bit and this bit. That creates a toroid that goes around like this, okay? And that is at the center of this bit here and the center of this bit here. Now, what is this bit? Is it something to do with the related neutrinos that's being condensed, or is it the other matter, or whatever? And we'll talk about things next week. But anyway, what we can say is we know that it creates a toroid at the bottom of this, and extremely likely creates a toroid on the underside of that as well. And that can be looked at by some other artist that has the ability to have a camera, synced cameras looking from below and above. But I'm pretty certain that that's what we're going to see if we do that, right? Now, if the direction of a toroid is in the direction where the outside is moving faster, kind of moving more flow water on the outside, a bit like works with the wing of a plane, or the rotor on a helicopter blade, or something like that, or a propeller on a plane. So as this goes down here, this will propagate in this direction. Now, what confused me when I was looking at the extreme interactions, it confused me for quite some time, is I wasn't certain when I was talking about it initially why, when this is traveling in this direction, it would have a beam that went out much faster than it and influenced material in front of it. I was pretty convinced there was some sort of torsional moment that was coming out here that we now know to be the toroidal moment. and that was interacting, I was pretty convinced, with relic neutrinos, because they were influenced by gravity and because of all the other stuff that I've talked about today, and so that these things would be interacting with those things. But I was confused, and it wasn't until I read that Dubovik paper that I found out that if this is going in this direction, making this pit, right, that the actual the torsional moment goes ahead of it, okay? And if the torsional moment is going ahead of it, the matter that it influences with it gets pulled in the opposite direction in this cone if there's a precession, okay? So there's material coming in here, okay? Now, if the structure above is actually these two structures, you can imagine how it would produce these two things in opposite phase to each other. So you can imagine how it would self-assemble the structure in here, okay? Now, on the other side, it's going in this direction, and so its torsional moment is coming up here and pulling matter in here. So if you've got matter being thrown into here, into this central point, which I believe this central point is where you get formed the crenellated iron-rich microsphere. It is also where you get formed crenellated iron-rich horn toruses, other types of toruses, including toruses. It gets formed in the center of whatever your structure, your torus structure is. But it is a magnetohydrodynamic structure because you've got your negative charges near the gas phase, and you've got your coherent matter that's being pulled through and being forced to cohere also through this process here. Now, the combination of the material being pulled in here from this torus and the material being pulled in here, plus the relic neutrinos and axions and literally anything that has spin on it will be pulled in here, and anything that has spin on it will be pulled in here. They get turned into something that forms in this loop. And when I very first saw those images from Alan Cusk, if I rotated this orthogonal to the plane of the page, and so I was looking at it from above, I imagined that if you had the two holes, one was going out there and coming in. It is the yin-yang. It is the yin-yang. So it's coming out of there. This is like the white hole in a black area, and then the black hole in a white area. And it's coming through that way in a loop round like that way. You rotate it around, you get to see what I've got on this page. Now, the very interesting thing is that we have a rotational moment here. So we have, through the center of this torus, we have our magnetic field. This produces a toroidal moment. And we might also have the fractal toroidal moment there. So we might already be two tors in. But let's say we're one tor in. This is producing a torus here, a flux flow here, okay? And that, I would imagine, would produce something here. Now, what did we see? What did we see here? Let's go and have a look. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to do a side swipe here. This is something. What I've said is that the magnetic fluid that forms the structure of the channels that are in the Vega Valley here, it's a magnetic fluid because it produces the pattern of magnetic fluid, just like ferrofluid produces this pattern. But if you looked at the images that I shared by Glenn Lidenhall, he showed that they have these hexagonal and pentagonal segments around it, and that is a local gravitational magnetic zone. And what would that produce? Well, that would produce exactly what we found on the walls of the Vega Valley, which are these cones. And so I imagine at the tip of the cone here, and the tip of the cone here, and the tip of the cone here, and the tip of the cone here, this is the golden ratio, that you would have one of this mesh of this Maxwellian superconducting superfluid condensate of electrons, and that would eventually create the material here. Now, the interesting thing is it's carbon at the front here, Carbon is not affected by this, and so you get carbon and diamond at the front there. Is a very special thing about carbon and why it doesn't get affected. It's not just the things that I've talked about in the past, and I will be talking about this next week. Then you get copper and copper oxides, and then you get the most different, you get the zinc oxides at the end. So it's arranged relative to the toroidal moment's influence on the matter that's involved, okay? And so this is what it is what it is, and at some point that's going to be accepted. So before I go to what I was going to show you, no, I'll go and show you that now, which is over here. So let's go. Okay. So this is key, and it's wonderful how this has all come together, but it's been a huge effort by everyone that's participated in the project. So this was an experiment. I think I ran these aluminium foil for about 180 seconds. It was in distilled water. I haven't been able to buy the very expensive aluminium 5.9s to run with this, but it's not really so relevant for this point. But basically, we're producing our chain of resonant nodes with our yin-yang collections. This here, what you're looking at here, look at the arrangement of this. It's not too dissimilar to what you see in this ultrasound thing here. Okay, so you've got, not that one. This one here. So you can imagine you have a yin-yang and a yin-yang, and they've just grouped together as two yin-yangs that formed a little family cluster. Okay, so hold that in your mind, and we'll go back to our video here. Not that one, but is it going to show me? Oh dear. Here. Okay, so imagine you've got a yin-yang and a yin-yang. That's basically what you saw in the middle of the water with the bubbles captured in time, okay, in my view. Now, if we move forward through this, get to a different point here. Right, so this is not so interesting. Okay, so this one's getting very interesting here. So again, we've got a yin-yang, yin, whatever, maybe someone over there somewhere. or this might be, this actually might be yin-yang. Yeah, no, this is yin-yang, yin-yang or something, but whatever. The important thing is here is that in between this and this, in between these two areas, when it caches, are these triangles. So, and you can see there's not so much triangle here, not so much triangle here. It's just this band of triangles here. Okay? And can everyone see that? So, I'm saying that the triangles form in a band which is bounded by an event horizon that is caused by this toroidal moment that's coming through this direction. So, you have a toroidal moment coming through this axis, you have a toroidal moment that's coming through this axis, and there will be a toroidal moment going through the other axis. But it doesn't matter, you've got a toroid of toroid moments there, and the thing is fractal anyway, so whatever. It's magnetohydrodynamic because we've got the electrons. They are moved around in this toroid, creating this toroidal moment. This captures leptons. What's unique about leptons? Not unique about leptons. What's important about leptons, which, by the way, includes quarks, and it includes muons, tauons, electrons, and it also includes neutrinos of all flavors. And it also includes axions and cold relic neutrinos. Okay, so these can be pulled into here. So when you understand this diagram, you recognize that at the center of this point here, it's a combination of toroidal moments. Okay, and already you have toroidal moments here. And this triangle is this absolutely critical triangle that we see in all of these different experiments over these many years, okay, that pulls into the central point. This is the magnetic core. It's a magnetic core, and this is the point at where the transmutation occurs, and this is exactly what we observed. These magnetic clusters here, these clusters of relic neutrinos, and probably ions as well, because as you can see, it's grabbed a chunk of aluminium, and it's important that it is aluminium. It's important. They are maybe flying around in there, and that might lead to what we observe in other images that we took of the ULTRA experiment. So I'm just going to pick that up. And that is these. Give me a second. Okay, so I'm talking about these braided waves. So this is again another experiment that I conducted, but what we found was not on a crack, not in a toroidal in any of the toroidal structure. There were these rotating two sections, like so. This is a spiral, and it's leaving these micron-wide interactions with the aluminium foil. So you've got two things, and it's kind of rotating around each other, just like we've seen in all of these different experiments. So this, I believe, is what came out of the center here. Something was formed in the center here, which is our soliton of cold neutrinos, this condensed cold neutrino cluster. And that is flying around in our tank, and it has an event horizon. Okay, and when it interacts with the aluminium, it instantaneously, without any effort whatsoever, causes this to do this. Okay, and that is what we're also seeing on the coming out on the OMA plate where we first saw this. And you can also see at the end of some structures here, let's get rid of that. Where are we? Here. The same kind of things going on the end of cracks sometimes. Okay. I go in here close. Do I get it? There we go. So this is kind of starting to be affected. That's very... So here we go. This is a bit where it's just kind of interacted with it. I've got a better image of that. I think I might do later on. Anyway, I've shared these before, and this will all go into the paper that I will be presenting in Italy. So you can see how this is, whatever this one was, it just touched the surface and instantaneously reorganized this matter. I mean, it's just... There's nothing that can not be shredded, let's put it like that, with this technology. Okay, so that is essentially it. I believe that this would also occur. So imagine, let's just imagine for the sake of argument, you had some piezoelectric material, I don't know, asbestos, and you put that into concrete. And if you wanted to stimulate this effect, you could do it two ways. You could use electromagnetic waves that would influence that piezoelectric material to produce exotic vacuum objects, or you could use electromagnetic waves to make it stretch or whatever and produce electrons, or you could you could use sound to get it to produce electrons. The electromagnetic waves would make it vibrate, so you could produce sound, or you could use sound to make electrons. There's two ways you can skin this cat. If you had some, for instance, I don't know, like you had a block of concrete that, I don't know, you might want to put into a building, and you had all this piezoelectric material in there, you could actually create the evos in situ, and it would be I don't know why you'd want to do that. Maybe you'd want to do that. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but just a random thought. Okay, so right, yeah. So basically, anything that creates a magnetohydrodynamic structure will form a torus. The torus will then yield
a gravitational beam, which can either be a direct beam or have a torsional moment to it. So it's at least a beam, but it might be have this toroidal moment to it. The toroidal moment is basically limited up to a point because of the shape of the torus itself. I'll talk more about that in the future. The structures that form in the center here, they can be torus themselves. They can be rings, toruses, horn toruses, whatever the other type of torus is, and spheres, effectively, pretty much. And this accounts for the things that we observe, and I'm going to talk about and show you data of physical things that have been created, mostly actually in the Vega Valley, but these things will be able to be repeated in the future. But of course, it's very, very effective, this, at producing these crenellated iron-rich spheres, and I believe the same thing is going on with ball lightning. This is what causes tornadoes. This is what causes the anti-gravity effect of tornadoes. This is what would allow someone to fall down a number of tens of stories from a building and not hurt themselves. This is the basis of things that you probably want answers to, and maybe we'll have those answers very soon. And I said to myself I would do this before I was 50, and I've only got a couple of weeks left, and so I kind of had to get this out the door right now. So I'm sorry that it wasn't perfect. I'm sorry we had a really difficult start to the day, but I think that knowing how this works, it has a full electrodynamics basis behind it, and what you would physically observe on the experiment when you do an experiment for 90 to 180 seconds is already showing you that this is what's happening. And this explains why we saw the transmutation. In my presentation at Azizi, I will reiterate the transmutations in the cesium chloride that we observed over 20 or 48 hours in ICP-MS. And you can see how the elements were interacting, and some were, fissioning, and then others were fusing or whatever. But it shows how it remediates waste. Just vibration will remediate waste. If they had put the vibrators of Roy Shinamaza in those tritium tanks in 2012 when he demonstrated those, they would, in my view, be largely tritium free. This is just horrendous what has gone on here. But it's the same thing in HHO. Why is it the same thing? In HHO, even if you're just electrolyzing, but ideally you are putting vibration in there as well, and the AC waveform, if that's what you're doing, because you're creating a mixed oxyhydrogen gas, that is pushing things to and fro, that will create these structures. And these structures, we've got these things being formed at 100 hertz, and we've got these things being formed at 23 kilohertz, and we've got 26 kilohertz or 24 kilohertz. We've got these things being produced at 43 kilohertz in our experiments, and we've got them being produced at 1.6 megahertz in Stringham and Claytor's experiment. It does not matter. You just need the vibration in the water. The coherent clusters in the water, the coherent ground state, will combine with easy water, creating the toroidal moment. This will cohere energy from the vacuum, which is available at any point in space. It is the wheelwork of nature. It is gravity. This thing will coalesce. These things have a magnetic but very short range moment, and that will allow them to bind to paramagnetic oxygen. So when you have oxyhydrogen gas, you have created those things by cohering energy from the vacuum, which was not in the original material. And when you burn these things come out. What do they form? They form a coherent cluster. The coherent cluster then does funky stuff with metal, which we've shown you what it does. This is it. This is HHO. And I've already shown you that most Leonard experiments were actually HHO. They were. That's what they were. Or DDO or DTO or whatever was in there. They are HHO. And this is the same with water mist. If you create a water mist, what do they use? They use 43 kilohertz misters, or many tens of kilohertz, or several tens of kilohertz misters. They will, on their surface, produce these things, right? Or they will produce these things in the volume. That is what's going on when you have, importantly, a spherical Tibetan singing bowl, like I showed you in the last week's presentation. The reason they cannot explain those pieces of jumping water with any hydrodynamic model that they have is because it's not exactly what's going on. You're having forming coherent cluster in there, and just like the Evo blasters in the Vega experiment, they blow up, and when they blow up, they shoot the water in the air. Right? It's trivial when you understand what's going on. It isn't obvious. It's trivial when you understand what's going on. It is yin yang. It is just so. It's just all the same thing. It's toruses, toroidal moment, coherent matter, blowing up coherent matter. But when things come through here, which, if you can imagine, you had 10,000 of these things in a square inch, right? And each of these are nuclear processes. They're nuclear processes, and they get a huge flux of condensed cold neutrinos in here. When anything that comes through that is a bit wonky, right? Like it's cesium-133, or it's 137, or it's strontium-90, or it's cobalt-60, or whatever comes out of your nuclear waste. It comes through here and it goes and comes out as something that it would rather be if there was a lot of time to go. This changes the time dynamic, because the time is this common cosmophysical factor identified by or suggested by Simon Schnoll that allows for observance of time. And so you're effectively got an acceleration of time going on in here because of the thing that causes the observance of time being concentrated in here and the material being channeled through it. And that is it, my friends, really. Beyond some things that I want to talk about next week and how it works. So this is HHO, which is most of LENR. This is why a Mars's vibrator plate works. We proved it works. We observed the data. It works. It synthesizes new elements. Why does it? And one's a maker and one's a breaker. It could be that one is condensing positrons, the other one's condensing electrons, or it's condensing cold neutrinos, and this is condensing cold antineutrinos. And so one is building matter, and the other one's taking matter apart. And depending on what elements you put in, it's just your seed value for your processing, and it likes to balance things out, right? And you will be absolutely amazed when you understand this, why bismuth and potassium is the choice of an alchemist. It completely follows totally logically why. Totally logically why. You don't have to make any leaps of faith, like, oh dear. Anyway. Right, okay, I'm going to see if you've got any questions here. But this is it. I have to thank you guys for sticking with this and for joining this presentation. It's been a very long road to get here, and we have this one presentation I have to do next week. This is the God's toolbox, and it does everything it's shown to do, from Tesla through Henry Moray, through Pap, through Ken Shoulders, through John Hutchison, all of the above. It's what it does, and this is why it does it. And I can understand why they didn't, as I said in beginning of 2018, I understand why they didn't want people to understand this technology. I understand it, because you can literally manipulate matter at the fundamental level. You can make matter, transmute matter, you can make matter disappear, and you can move matter. I called a video many moons ago tractor beam, and I was deadly serious. This is a tractor beam. It's a tractor beam. It's like gravity you can turn on and off. Also, if you had a craft that was using this technology, you could, I don't know, park it over a nuclear silo, and through the ground and through whatever protection someone chooses to defend that nuclear equipment with, you have two modes of disabling those nuclear weapons. One is through the fact that it interacts with p-n junctions and gums them up, so your electronics that uses any form of semiconductor will fail. The other one is you can take the tritium that's in there, or you can take other isotopes that are necessary for them to work, and you can make it non-functional. The tritium will decay, right? So if you have tritium and you remove all the electrons, right, you don't have any neutrons coming out, right? You just have the electrons coming out, and you end up with 3 helium. You have 3 helium and deuterium. This thing is designed to work with deuterium and tritium or whatever. You know, so knowing what the particular device is, you have 2 different ways. And I think I referred to this many years ago, that there was a 2001 paper by some Japanese physicists, and they said, like, if you could create a hypothetical intense focus beam of neutrinos, you could, as long as you knew where the nuclear weapons were, you could disable them by firing this beam through the Earth. Through the Earth. Well, my friends, this is how you can do it. You can disable nuclear weapons in flight. And that is why for many years I have said, they don't care. They don't care. It's all fear porn. It's all fear porn. The old weapons are just being sold for anyone who's got money to buy them, right? Don't even care. We'll leave a whole load over here because it's irrelevant. We'll try and sell these off. We'll have a war to have a garage sale and get rid of all of the old stock, because this is where it's going, my friends. And I didn't want it just to be something that subjugates us. It is something that is freaking magic. It is freaking magic. But there's nothing beyond this. There is literally nothing beyond this. This is the end of the road for what you can discover that's actually genuinely important. And I said many, many years ago, I pray, I hope, and I know that this will be the last thing that's rediscovered, because I realized many years ago this has already been discovered. This is the last thing that will be discovered by man. AI will do the rest. And the beauty of this technology is you can shut down AI at a distance. You can gum up all those NP junctions. Just stops working. All right. So it is our effect. It is our thing. What I'm going to show you next week, you know, it's just like cherry on the top. But it's been a pleasure to have this intellectual journey over these past 10 years. Someone was telling me today, oh, you've got to have a hypothesis and try and if you can find the data. And I was thinking, well, you know, that's okay, but people just think you're trying to curve fit, or you're seeing pictures in clouds. My view was there was 130 different theories in this field. They can't all be right. That all of them are seeing at least some of what each other person is seeing. It didn't matter whether they're in a gas system or a plasma system or a solid state system. Why? That it can't be all different things. There must be some underlying principle behind all of these things that is going on. And the transformation really was, it's like Victor Schauberger says, you know, comprehend and copy nature. And that is it. I listened to Piantelli, and he said, don't tell nature what it is, let nature show you. As Ken Scholder says, if you don't look, you won't find. You won't even know what you didn't find. And those 3 things in your head, and just looking and seeing what you're seeing here is not ordinary. People will just say, what am I looking at? What am I looking at? It has an event horizon. That is interesting to me, right? So, you know, it's just been a total pleasure, really. Okay, so I'm gonna look through and see if you've got any questions. Okay. I'm going to challenge people to find out why. Oh God, it's going to be too easy. You know, I've told you, aluminium, bismuth, potassium, but specifically potassium 40, and it's just amazing. It's just going to be amazing. Like, I have an extra slide actually here, a bonus slide. It's like, why? Oh, did I put it in? I don't know whether I put it in. Oh, I'm going to put it in right now. I'm going to put my bonus slide in. Let me do that. Okay. Okay. I'll show you this slide for a start. Okay. This ball hole, right? This one here. I believe you have the electromagnetic phantom around here, producing this hexagonal structure, like we see impacting the silicon dioxide anode sheath. And in the center of this, you have this iron-rich crenellated 3.6 micron microsphere. So there is a phantom in here. And because the phantom has a very close field that is intensely magnetic, then this diamagnetic zinc oxide and copper oxide cannot come within the structure. So it actually keeps that away there. Okay. So there's one extra slide that I want to add in here. File, and now I'm up there, and I'm going to go file, and no, I'm going to go here. Let's find this. Did I do it? I don't know whether I did it. Did I? Talk amongst yourselves. Yes, I did. Yes, I'll put that there. Right. This is our bonus slide. It's actually a title slide from another presentation. So you notice there's not much damage here, not much damage here, not much damage here. This piece of brass on the brass below, where you have this toroidal structure with this conical thing going on here, right? No coincidence now, you know what it is. You know what you're looking for when you know what you're looking for. Under here, there was potassium hydroxide, okay? And the potassium has something very special about it that allows this to occur. There is very specific reasons why potassium and bismuth are very good alchemical chemicals, right? There we go. Okay, and the other one is indium. You just wouldn't believe it that indium is it's just fantastic. It's just fantastic. Of course, you can do all kinds of element isotopes once you understand it and you can hone it. But I'm going to be leaving that for next week. Okay, so I'm going to look through. Yeah, Crypto Alchemist has given a good summary. Basically, it's electromagnetic fractal toroids leads to this fractal toroidal moment. And it's important because you need the fractal toroidal moment to be able to assemble toroids themselves and these various things, forms of toroid. Okay. Spirit in action. So I believe that I'm gonna show a slide from O'Day because I believe that spirit is this stuff. And I'm going to show a couple of slides from O'Day, which I think you've seen both of them actually. But now we're basically at the end of O'Day in terms of the basics. So the first one is slide 82 and the next one is 83. So these are two slides from the original January 2018 presentation of O'Day. So it is no coincidence that it is the lotus position. The hand position has a torus and a torus, okay? We know from Kirlian photography and from Ken Shoulders saying that the easiest way to create an EVO is to discharge it from your fingers. Everyone's had that static discharge from your fingers. Now, this produces a vortex going around this way. Now, for a long time, I didn't understand how whatever could go on and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, if the vortex is going around this way and the vortex is going around this way, this is counter-rotating vortices. This is the left and right swastika. This produces, as I've shown you, over here, the counter-rotating vortices produces the toroid that goes round. This creates the toroidal moment that goes through the center of here, okay? And this is the toroid goes round this way and the toroid goes round this way. This is the right hand as you looked in that image and this is the left hand as you looked in the image. What does that do? It forces the toroidal moment down into the earth. This brings up relic neutrinos or whatever energy in this form through the body and it coheres here. And what happens actually, and you see this on the Lion reactor, as these things get bigger, you get the 2 points together, like my what do you call it? The remote view logo from it's part of the SEM from the line reactor. So they come together, and you got your toroidal moment below, and then you get the central bit. But as they get bigger, they move slightly apart, and as they get more energetic, and the thing moves up. The point of focus moves up. And I said many moons ago, what are they pointing at? And last week I think I said they're pointing at each other, but they're also, because they're pointing each other into the plane and out of the plane. That forms a toroid, and that focuses the point of the magnetic focus, which is actually the core of this structure. Okay, so that moves up through your chakras and moves up through your chakras and moves up through your chakras until it reaches the shape of this triangle, which will be above your head when you've really got the energy in the right place. And the Om symbol is oh God, we've done this before. It's the yin and the yang, but the yin and the yang on our plane here produces a toroidal moment that comes out, okay, itself, okay. And the toroidal moment, where are we? The toroidal moment comes out here of your yin and yang, and it forms this twisting thing, and we've shown that on ultra experiments as well, and you actually see this on the brass from last week actually. So let me just show you that on the brass from last week. It's freaking amazing, okay. I'm literally the luckiest guy alive to have done this work, really. I'm going to show you where is it, tip of the pyramid. And we'll go down to, have I got it there? Have I got it there? Oh no, I haven't got the object there. Okay, all right. Can I bring up the video? I'll bring up the video. Sorry, I'm gonna have to find the correct place. Can I bring up the images? Is that going to be easier? I can do that. Let me do that. Talk amongst yourselves. This one here. No. Right. Okay. I can show it with this. This will do. All right. So, if you can remember what I was saying last week, this bit here, one of these probably will be the positive and one will be the negative charge. Okay. So this center bit here is this center bit here, and you've got your toroid here. And this is the center that goes through here where it's shifting the material through. If you remember, there's a bubble on the other side. And this is the toroid here. This is the breaker because it's removing material from here with the toroid that's here and forcing it through this hole. And this is the maker because the material's coming down and it's creating this splat. But between this one and this one, which are at these angles, and I'm giving a bit away here that I'm going to talk about next week, but you have this line here, and this is the same thing you see on the Om symbol, and this is breaking this material, and this is coming up this line and coming into the center of this, and this is splatting it down there. So it has this line and it has this center line, and in our ultrasonic experiments you actually see this peak that comes up, and it's like that. So it's actually like a ridge. It's a ridge. So this is the ridge in the magnetohydrodynamic structure between these two toroidal charge separated toroids, and that produces the flux loop between them. Okay. All right, fine. Where was I? Not there. Okay, yeah. So I was showing you this slide from Ode. Okay, so. So this is the center line that I just showed you, and on one side you would have the brass, on the other side you would have that black, probably copper oxide, or maybe even carbon or whatever. But one's the breaker and one's the maker. Okay, and so you also have the emissions here from the toes, but they're less relevant. Okay, and the resonance when you are chanting, doing this, helps the coherence process within the whole body. And as I've said, it doesn't matter what frequency you use, but I think the Om that you do is is relevant to you, I believe. This is my hypothesis. I've never ever actually meditated. I spent 8.5 years in India and I never did it, and I watched lots of people doing it, so it's just funny. But I think it's actually resonant to probably your head or to your lungs, and that will produce the maximum vibration. And whatever vibration you have in your body, will create these structures, which will allow you to cohere energy from the vacuum. And it will, because of the way that you are centering that resonance, it will focus into this central line. And the more you do it, and the more energy you will cohere, and the more that will come through. And because it is a neutral, it's neutral stuff, it will interact with your body. And maybe you want to hit the pineal gland, and that will give you some potential euphoria or connection. The cheats way to do it is to create, I suppose, monatomics. But really, that's you're embedding into that material this energy from the vacuum. But really, it's probably best to just meditate. It would achieve the same effect, but it's much more natural. I think it's more human, to be honest. Less chance of things going wrong. Right. So, and why do I think the ancients have got it? Well, because you have this flying dude from our favourite area in Mesopotamia, Sumerian culture, and he has a ring around his body, and the ring has these rings. This is a fractal structure, and off this structure he has wings. This, in theory, is making him be able to fly, and moreover, he has a halo above his head. It's hilarious. You've got to love it, really, haven't you? And you have this structure where the center point of this structure is in this winged birdie, and the winged birdie has a triangular thing that comes out of the bottom. And if you look at this particular thing closer, it's actually a different piece of artwork. The piece comes into the center, and it actually becomes part of his dress, as it were. But it is this triangular structure that tends towards this central point. So it's a really a thing of beauty. How this all ties together. So there we go. That was that. Those are the two slides that I will share from, and I'll share this again. Actually, this is on. I spoke about this a long time ago. On the 20th of February 2018, Andrew Johnson, who I've been regularly voicing my ideas to, sent a website with an image from the inside of Ed Leedskalnin's tome called A Book in Every Home. Edward built Coral Castle, apparently, with anti-gravity technology. Copyright 1936 by Edward Leedskalnin. And he has two triangles pointing to a yin-yang. Two triangles, right? The two triangles pointing. This is the yin-yang. That's it. It's fractal, so... It's hilarious. It's just hilarious. It's just all there. It's all there. Oh dear. All the same thing. Right, we'll kill that O'Day. I'll touch on a couple of slides there. Right. Okay. Yes, Harry, our body, we can do this within us. We have the power. The reason you can bend metal is because those people are able to create these clusters within their body, and then they pass them through their fingers with intent. And the intent is do action in this material, heal this person, love this person. The power of touch is phenomenal. This is why it's so important to join hands when you are willing as a collective group in a circle. It's it's like, did we accidentally create all these different customs and these things, or was it some knowledge that was given to someone and it just got passed down the generations? I don't know. I mean, but I used to think so many things were bonkers, but it's not that they make complete sense when you understand what it is. It's that they are the only thing they could be. And anything else wouldn't make sense. Like, Paul Eline, yeah, I said many years ago, I said they've been dangling it in front of our eyes all of our lives. And when I say they might not even be alive, they might not even be here, or they might be. But in all of those Masonic symbols and all of those religions and heraldic symbols of power, it's codified. It's codified. It's like it's a big club and you ain't in it, right? But do these people actually know? I don't know. Yeah, it's a bit weird. Okay, question. Corky says, second line in Solin pattern is one word, essence. Why? Well, sorry, I missed that. What I'm saying is that I would argue that the thing that's called the Holy Spirit is the neutrino flux. It's the my original name for this presentation was the cohering the food of the universe. The universe is not an entropy disaster. The universe is a living organism, and it's constantly creating more of order. It's constantly creating order. And right now we are living in the terrible age when we are disordering things. We are choosing to have an energy system based on disordering things. And it's working against the order of nature. What nature wants to create, it has this ontological will to continue to create. And as I said in the last presentation, this has the ability to provide us with 150 million times more yield of energy than you get from burning carbon. 1 C to CO2, 3 nuclei to 1 molecule. That's 5 eV. This produces 1 gigaelectron volts. But anyway, the point being, it's millions of times more. The population of this planet could be in the trillions, but we wouldn't even necessarily need to occupy this. We could go out into the cosmos because, well, there's some interesting things you can do with this. This is, I think, the Holy Spirit. This is the Holy Spirit. And it comes from God. It comes from everything, which is God. It comes from the One. It is source. It's where the source, and it's our ability to access it. And we do it through meditation. You know, that is I believe, and I've never done it, by the way. I've still never done it, but I probably should. But this is our innate ability that we are distracted from connecting with, and being with other people and working together collectively on something is part of that process of creation. Lucas, I think, yes. I think before I released Red Pill in 2018, I said, this is Revelations, you're in it. And I was totally confident that that was the case. I didn't know how things would go, but I have been wrong so many times, it hurts. I've spared you a lot of the wrongness because I've put out what I saw, because the nature is only showing you the truth. It cannot lie. And I have got it wrong so many times, but I've been helped by so many of you looking at what I put out and sharing your thoughts and things that you have seen. And those things were all part of the iterative process. There is so much more to learn. We are at the beginning of a journey of reconnecting with source and with the truth. We are coming out of the Azura period, and you guys, you're the second luckiest after me. I feel like I'm the luckiest person alive to have had the pleasure of doing this job. It's going to be a bit interesting next week, because like that, I'll have my personal goals and what I had a vision of when I was in my pre-10 years. The job is kind of done, and then it's kind of like, this doesn't change. It never has, and it never will. even if we're all wiped off the face of the planet, and some cockroach ends up being political in a 10 million years time and running this part of this solar system in this part of our galaxy, they will eventually rediscover this, and they'll think, hey, well, aren't we clever? And it's like, no. To see how unclever you are, you just need to see that it's been all around you all of your lives. The yin yang is the thing that does it. It is it. It's in all this archaeology. So they already worked it out. It is not ours to own. It is not ours to own. We are not discovering anything. We are realizing the truth. Now, it might not be all of the truth. There's certainly lots more this can do. But as Ken Shoulder said, if there's something you want to do well, whatever it is, this would probably be the technology that would do it. How Ken restrained himself, I don't know. How he restrained himself, I don't know what he knew. I can only speculate, but he was working on this for 33 years. And he was starting with a direct line to John Hutchison from the beginning, and this wealth of experience in plasma. So, and any access to any papers he could possibly want. What did he know? And I can say for me personally, it makes me very comfortable with the idea of dying, because I know it's not that important. It's just a transitory state of our being. That for me is almost the biggest win from this is a deep sense of peace. But maybe he felt that too. It's also like sometimes you don't want to realize the end of the journey, and so I like to think that this is you guys are the people that have the ability to spread the word, and it's going to be easier the more people that replicate the ULTR experiment. And the ULTR experiment is basically an interpretation of a Tibetan singing bowl, and it's one of the first videos I published on this subject 9 years ago with my darling wife, when she was pregnant with our first child, and how it's come full circle. It is and next week's going to be quite special, because the proof is just amazing. It's just amazing, and you can choose to do it. You don't need to choose to do it, but we can clean up nuclear waste. We don't need to have rare elements. There's no reason to have a lack of energy. That solves every other problem that humans have. Once you've got the energy solved, it's all, solvable. Great, Crypto. I might be able to join you for that. I can't go into it, but I won't be here tomorrow. And I'm meeting someone very, very special. I won't say when or where or who, but I think what I'm seeing is some very clever scientists taking this seriously now. And that is before what we shared last week and what we shared today and what we're going to share next week. It's just, it's just such an honor, such an honor. Okay, so really I have to thank Henk and David and Alan Goldwater. This would absolutely have not been realizable without your efforts. And it takes a special kind of stupid to, in the face of ridicule, in the face of doubt, even from family members and friends, in the face of the whole system, to spend your time, your money, and your intellect to do experiments, working with your gut feeling and your intuition. Thank you. I mean, if Alan Goldwater hadn't taken his wife's virtual Tesla and made it into a scanning electron microscope, I would have never realized how valuable it was to look at that detail. And it led to a whole cascade of things, and it seemed that every obstacle put in the way was almost comical, because whatever happened, it was always forcing the situation that would lead faster to the answer. It's like this was going to happen, it was inevitable, my wife said that if I was to die for whatever reason, that could you guys help her out? I'm not going to be doing anything to myself, let's put it like that. But I have been threatened to my face directly, and by how we do call it, passive aggressive threatening. And you all know how I was directly threatened a number of times to not talk about gravity. I was prevented from speaking about gravity. But the reality is, how I look at those things right now is that I think the universe was trying to tell me that these things were related. It was kind of like, don't look there, do not look there, absolutely do not look there. And it's like, oh, maybe I should be looking there. And so here we are. We're at a situation where the thing that causes gravity, according to CERN, is clustered. It produces these solitons. And how are they clustered? Well, they must be clustered by something that can interact and produce a gravitational beam. And what is that? Well, it's something that basically is a conical shape of a structure, a conical output shape of a beam that was suggested by John Archibald Wheeler in 1954. And so when I said in the beginning of 2018, I believe that they had grasped most of this technology in the early to mid 1950s. I stand by that. I believe that most of the important aspects of this technology and what it can do was established. Certainly the first boiling water reactor was developed in secret in the Soviet Union in the 1950s with deuterium and palladium. And I've shown you in this book, it produces a gravimagnetic rotor in the center of your material where the transmutation's occurring, in the center. It's there. Just read Matsumoto's book, okay? He didn't get everything right. And that's the point. You don't have to get everything right. And by the way, right? The ball is formed in the center of this toroid, okay? This is where the lead ball is formed, right? It is hollow because of the way this structures the material. And it has a pole which ejects the carbon. It's just the way it works. It's just the way it works. Well, such as will be. I think they're in a catch-22 situation, because I've done a little bit of crazy. Mix this, like someone was criticizing me the other day for talking about, things in woo-woo areas of life, like crystals and meditation, and also things like artifacts from various ancient cultures. And I'm thinking, well, I genuinely believe that they are absolutely depicting this technology, and there's nothing else I can imagine that they're depicting, and no one else has said that they could be depicting something else, because what else do they depict? You've either got to say there's something that's made deliberately, or they just happen to be where someone put their pen on the paper, or they're made in the clay. And so and I said, by doing that to a degree, I've been able to fly under the radar, and you guys, which is a collective mass of people, it's like someone says, well, explain it to me in 20 minutes. And it's like, well, in 20 minutes, they've got one question, and it takes me 4 hours to answer that one question to their satisfaction. And that's why when I produced O-Day presentation, 100 and whatever slides, numbers of slides it is, 130, 115 slides or whatever, I knew it would take me years. It would take me years. And I had to do it better time. And I had to project, how can I do this so that I don't alert too many people before it's all done. And it's basically done now, like next week. But, you know, everything you needed to know to come up with what I presented today was already shared a long time ago. And everything you needed to know to come up with what I presented last week was already shared a long time ago. And everything you need to know for what I'm going to share next week, you already have everything you need to come to that conclusion. But anyway, so the point is that if something was to happen to me, they've got a problem, because then it basically proves, absolutely categorically proves, that this is what you should be thinking about, and it'll be their undoing. So if they did anything to me, that would be it. Like, the idea is what's important. The truth is what is important. What nature is showing you here, right here. What nature is showing you right here in this beautiful image from the James Webb Telescope. What it's showing you here, and in this action of ultrasonics in water, it's just a thing of great beauty. I just think it's hilarious that it even has these two forks that's coming out, and it's identical. It's like, and the point of the spiral galaxy here, and then the other arm of the spiral galaxy here. It's just, it is surreal. It's surreal to think that when Bostick in 1956 or 7 or whatever, he said that these plasmoids, certainly how I see them clustering, could explain everything from the microcosm to the macrocosm, which if you reverse that is as above, so below. This is as below, and this is as above. As above, so below. As above, so below. As above, so below. No, it's not right, Crypto. I'm not important. I'm not important. My life is a meaningless blip in the mass of time. What is important is that we stop the lies, the usury of human energy and life, and we free our species from this usury. We free it from this fear, this scarcity notion, this nonsense about global warming. We can resolve all issues that are given as an excuse for global warming with this technology. You can even fake global warming with this technology. You can create that. We know the clusters are in the air naturally. They've gathered them by putting it into the oxygen dissolved in water, perovskite, right? And using a laser and capturing the birdies on 400 ASA film. We know because Parkhomov has captured them and focused them on cobalt-60 and caused a change in the decay rate. They exist in the environment. Knowing that they exist in the environment, by using electromagnetic waves, you can cluster them. What will that do? It'll release heat. You can also blow the ones up that are already there. That will cause instantaneously cooling. You have hot on its own, or cold on its own, or hot and cold, you create a weather system. And then you can use a similar technology to guide that weather system. Yes, my friends, you can control the weather. You can trigger earthquakes, you can trigger volcanoes. It's tedious. You can fake any kind of disaster you like at a distance, and everyone will go, oh, isn't it sad all those people died from an earthquake? Isn't it sad all those people died from Hurricane Katrina? I wonder how that occurred in the southern hemisphere. It's just... Well, that's nice of you to say, Crypto Alchemist, but in the scheme of things, I matter to my children and to my wife and to my mother and my brothers and stuff, really. That beyond that, and that will also only be transitory. This is not about me. It's about what you can do with this technology that will better your fellow man and make the world a better place for other animals to live in, and let's go out and explore the universe. Well, Ken, that's nice of you to say, but he says that all are important. We're as a cog in the overall conscious field. I have something, but I'm of no illusion that this would not be discovered, and it has already been discovered, probably many times by humans living on this planet, and certainly you can see it in the archaeological record. So it's not an achievement. It's kind of like I'm an also ran, but at least I had the honor and the opportunity to do this work in my brief existence, rather than someone else. But many people, like I've referred to so many people that spent their lives and died without joining these things together. Maybe they did join them together, but they were too worried that they would be criticised. I don't know, but maybe they're income dependent on it, or maybe they signed a non-disclosure agreement, or maybe they were in some black project. I don't know. I pity them to have realised this and not be able to share it. It's just like I say, if Ken Shoulders did know all of this, it must have been unbelievably frustrating that he couldn't say it. And I believe there's scores of people out there that know this, but they can't share it. And that is a horrible life to be living. You can save and help not only fellow man, you can help the biosphere, and you can help all the species that we share this biosphere with. But you can't say it because you won't get your pension, or something might happen to your family, or you might have a boating accident. I don't know. It's just so frustrating. David Bertilia, there is a lot of engineering work to be done. As I said at Aarhus University, there will be whole universities where there are departments, and each department will have 1,000 years of discovery. But there's some big wins that can be got. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit. To my mind, the radiation remediation is done. You just got a lot of deliberate barriers in the way. Right? There might be the Agent Smith type barriers where people are programmed and all they can do is respond with it. That's not possible, therefore I'm not going to let you try to show it's possible. Right? They're everywhere. You've got so many people that are programmed to not see what is possible. Then the energy generation is there, and given the fact that I'm telling you, I'm pretty darn certain everything is pointing to the fact that John Archibald Wheeler combined with Dubovik, and what we physically observed in your experiments, David Butler, with those extreme interactions with those travelling EVOs, those coherent matter travelling waves, which is what they are. They are firing this toroidal moment in front of the direction in which they're travelling, and that is forcing the interaction. This is part of the way that they cluster in actual fact. You know, that in itself, there's so many applications. It boggles the mind. You know, when I was thinking about what I was going to say this weekend, it was like, actually, there's so much different things, so many low-hanging fruits that are so obvious now. I don't know what to say, and I thought, well, I saw that beautiful image here of the spiral galaxy, and I thought, yeah, I think we'll start there. Okay, I have to do something tomorrow, and I'll have to travel early. I'm going to look through to see if you've got any questions, but I'll just do a quick recap. So essentially, this was Ode gravity transformation, and this was explaining ULTR, which is the MFMP's experiment for 5-year-olds and above. I guess maybe a 3-year-old can do it, but I don't know what value they get out of it. But it's fun for a 5-year-old, and with tea break time scales and so on. And I believe that the explanation that I've given here, which is supported by data from multiple independent parties, and the physics behind it is already proven in 1965, or rather the mathematics is proven, and what you observe coming out of these systems is explained by this, is the underpinnings of most linear experiments, and I would argue ultimately all, because you're effectively in here where you create your ion crenellated sphere. You've effectively got the same toroidal moments that you would get in a ball lightning that creates the core of the ball lightning, the magnetic core of the ball lightning, which is either a torus through to a sphere by changing your axis. In fact, I can draw what that is actually, and I'll show you the physical evidence next week. Basically, if you have your central focus point here, okay, is that going to do a line like that? If you've got your moment out there and you spin that through 360 degrees, you get a torus. Here you get a horn torus. I can't remember the name of this. I don't know why it slipped my mind. I know exactly what it is, but I can't remember. So first prize for of Kudo for remembering what this name of this torus is. And then the torus where it's directly on the center line is the sphere. So we've seen the crenellated torus, and we've seen various toruses. We have seen this, and I will show this. No, in fact, we've not seen so many of these, but we've definitely seen this. And I will show you the physical evidence of that, and we've seen plenty of these. Okay, so gravity transformation, and this word transformation will come into my presentation that I want to give for the Russians later in the year. And so we saw these galaxy-like structures. It got me excited, and there's a similar two-spot structure here with a spiral-type nature to it on Matsumoto's 93 work. We talked about this, was effectively talking about a black hole type structure, but also other structures which had multiple of these black hole type structures around. We saw something similar with a central spot with a zone, different to theirs, but nicely rendered in this copper oxide with this probably carbon, given that I think this is maybe carbon over here. But it's this central zone where you have this gap in between, where you have this very specific shape here. And the specific shape, I believe, is caused by the toroidal moment on here that produces this vortical structure in here, which is this string vortex. That's the vortex that comes in. It has a very specific structure, and you can see some sort of indication of what that looks like here on this long-lived plasmoid that lasted for 2 days after a plasma flow discharge by Bogdanovich. And this is the same structure as you see here with the work of Hutchison in steel from 1986 and in aluminium from 2007, and this is 40 microns across and this is 4 centimeters across. So this is a number of orders of magnitude. This is scale invariant, and this is the kind of like top down on the center of the toroid structure. This is the string vortex soliton. So here's what I was talking about. This is the kind of string of the vortex. This is the string of the vortex going into the center. And the string of the vortex would go around here, and this produces your cone. This is the cone, and this is the cone in various different technologies. I referred to it in Matsumoto's gravitational paper also, and on his black hole papers, and that is exactly the same thing. This is Geons. This is this very important paper from 1954 by this Manhattan Project researcher, John Archibald Wheeler. I think he was the lecturer of Feynman, and he talks about the fact that you have
this electromagnetic wave that goes around, produces these regions of strong magnetic fields in between electric fields. And if you imagine this is an electric cluster, this would be an electron cluster, this would be a subtoroid. And he specifically says this is a simple toroidal Geon, not a complex toroidal Geon. This is the first toroidal Geon that produces a gravitational vector. But of course he doesn't talk about the toroidal moment because that hadn't been derived at that time. But in this same paper he talks about wormholes between a black hole and a white hole, which is your yin and your yang. He defines and invents the term wormhole in this paper, as I understand it, and he invents the term black hole. And I believe that by 1954 they very much knew how these things worked and what they could be doing with them. And so I showed on the silicon dioxide these type of Geon type structures, these exotic vacuum object type clusters. And I gave a number of examples here. This one here, and it even has this S-type shape in the middle here. This one is a kind of hexagonal shape here. This one's nice because it has these substructures coming out, but the substructures have substructures in. And there are many, many examples on that wonderful sample from Henk Uren. So thank you, Henk. This one's interesting because it has the substructures, but it seems to have two layers. Now, I don't know whether it's embedded itself in the fused quartz, and where it came to rest, it's kind of like it's on the boundary, but you've got the substructures within the substructures here as well. So you're really seeing the fractal nature there, and it's lovely. And here is one on the Eastern Plateau, and it produces this same structure, but it's got some ions, and it seems to be leaving a carbon trail. So this might be a breaker. It might be taking other ions and putting them through potentially an antineutrino. Is it an antineutrino? Would you want an antineutrino? If you want to, maybe it's a neutrinos, and it would convert the protons into, it would be grabbing the electrons to feed itself and converting them into protons. Is that right? Taking out the electrons, causing the collapse of the antineutrino. So neutrinos. Anyway, the point is that it's laying down carbon. Here's a more interesting cluster. This is a hexagonal petal cluster by someone else. This is the petal clusters by Solin, and he says this is a superconducting wave that goes around here, just as it has been described as a Geon. And I believe that that's what's going on here, that's what's going on here. And this is a little bit wonky one, so maybe some of these points in the middle, I don't know. But a lot of these things seem to have these two spots in the middle, two spots. And I believe that this is the other cluster of this other matter, and it might be matter and antimatter, or as in neutrinos and antineutrinos, possibly, just in the same way that you get charge separation outside of the gravitational influence, and that these substructures are the same as the overall structure, and that is why you see that thing going on with our friend Adamenko. And so that's a close-up with the central point. I talked about the torus and how that plays into the yin-yang structure. Here we have a yin-yang and we have a yin-yang, and we see this arrangement on other videos that I've shown you of an ultra experiment. Here is what I believe potentially is going on in the central cluster here. So you have these things coming out, and they have these two spots in the middle, and we see this cavitation spots, and we saw coming from the center of a cavitation spot the first spiral structure, and it looks like it's kind of like a half spiral, and we've seen this before, and I imagine that it's because it's different the way it interacts with matter, and we see the toroidal structure that came out of one of these things, and a blown up one, and these yin yangs, and then I do some comparisons where I take that structure and I overlay it onto this one. And only when these things align up with these beams coming out do you get these two spots aligning with the structure in the center. And again, with the reflected and rotated bubble structure on this, the wonderful phantom galaxy, do you see this bright spot sort of off center here in the bar? You see it align with this brighter of the two spots here. And these lines line up with the start of the spiral elements of the spiral galaxy, and you even have these wonderful two little fingers coming out at exactly the same angle.
And then I talked about a couple of waypoints. There's more to use, but I think these are just interesting. Matsumoto's gravitational collapse of matter, the peak, the conical patterns that he observed, the active centers that are magnetic and gravitational field. This is exactly what they have. And they form gravimagnetic rotors in local zones, and so that means there's a very intense fall off the kind of like event horizon that I'm talking about. And he described something very similar to the gravitational waves and how strange radiation is formed and stuff. So he was very, very close. I think he probably had it. He had videos of these things. And then Shishkin, his cavitation leading to the production of cold neutrino condensates, and therefore the toroidal moment that is produced by the cavitation process allows the production of the cold neutrino condensates, and that therefore means that it has to produce a gravitational attractive force, this tractor beam as I called it so many years ago, referring to the Lion reactor. And because neutrinos and axions and stuff can only be affected by the weak force and gravity, so it must be gravity, and therefore we're agreeing with all of the other authors. And therefore the pattern that is on my ring here, this one here, that one there, is the pattern that was the most important change in my view to the answer to the message that was sent out in 1974 on the Arecibo telescope, which sadly has departed now. And this was the method of communication, not by electromagnetic waves. They use gravitational waves. They don't use electromagnetic waves. They use gravitational waves. This is the thing that we use to produce a electromagnetic beam. This is the thing that you use to produce a gravitational beam. It's a fractal of 2 on 2 on 2 with the central thing, the Ra. And then we showed the clustering, which we've talked through before a number of times. This is the most important one. And then this in terms of these orbiting charge separation things. And this is where the clusters are interacting with the forward-looking beam. And then we talked about, now I will go into a little bit more detail, the fact that you have inside the plasma spot, you actually have the two structures there. I talked about the tungsten chop shop, but I haven't got the video in there. And I talked about the fact that I believe that there is an electromagnetic phantom in here at the core. And this is probably a yin. So it is creating a magnetic core rather than breaking material up. Okay, so this is forming this spherical 3.6 micron cluster. And this diamagnetic material is being forced away from the electromagnetic phantom that is in here. As Solin says, it has this local gravimagnetic sort of zone, and that the same thing is going on in here. And we'll talk more about the importance of why potassium-40 breaks up. I won't go into all the papers, but I will include the papers in. I will go through the video meticulously, and over the next 2 days I will insert all of the papers in order as I originally discussed them in this. So that is about that. So I'll have a quick look for any questions. Can you drop us a StreamYard link and host? Okay. Right. I can't join you because I have to go to sleep. It's 2:20 here. Sorry. I'd like to, and I can't do it. I was going to do a live Q&A on what I call the event, but I would go and look at my movie 20 years on. And that I did this time last year, and I would look at that in context of the things that I've said today, because there are several anomalies that are finally explained by what I've gone through today, and I think it probably wraps up how that occurred. And so there we go. Yeah, it creates matter, Harry, by assembling non-physical material into matter. Okay, all right, fine. I do go to sleep, Alan. Thank you. I'll talk a little bit more about this with you when I can get the next opportunity. So, but yeah, I think thank you so much. So Magic Sound is online. So please give a shout out to Magic Sound, David Boutelier, and Henk Uren, which this absolutely, I know all of you guys have put so much into this and asking the right questions at the right time, but those guys, if they hadn't made certain decisions to do certain things when they did them, I would not have achieved my life goal before I was 50 to explain something. I didn't know what I had to explain, but it was obvious when I was 40 that this would be it. But I didn't even think I could do it. But anyway, I think we're nearly there. So yeah, thank you. Please say thank you to those guys. I implore you. Geet technology is related to this. When you look at what Geet was technology was doing, it's like, yeah, okay, it's doing the same thing. So what I was saying about actually HHO, you always have cavitation, whether you've got an AC waveform in there, bubbles forming, or you've got actual vibration in there. You can now see why the Amasa vibrator cavitator is much better at producing highly active gas and more volumes of it. One, it's producing the oxygen in situ and producing the vibration, produce the cavitation. The cavitation process we've shown does the transmutation, and we've shown it produces the cavitation spots, and we've shown that it has these vortices that come out of the center of the cavitation spots, and we know that that is the signature of the coherent matter being formed, and the coherent matter must be formed in that center spot by this toroidal moment, and the toroidal moment is able to interact with axions, probably even quarks, which gets down to why it can rip matter apart, electrons, in fact all leptons, so it doesn't matter whether it's leptons or charged or uncharged, whether they're neutrinos or electron family. Okay, I'll tell you what I'll do is, if you ask questions in the remote view blog, I'll try and answer them there. I will go through all of the comments that are here over the week, and I will try and answer any questions that are given with credit to the person that asked the question. So with that, I thank you, Daniel Foster. Yes, David. Yes, David's got his wonderful newborn to take care of, and yes, oh God, you've got the mother-in-law coming tomorrow, so don't do anything outside of preparing for that, David. Yeah, working tech. So like, vibration is a working tech for fixing radiation remediation. Vibration is a working tech for synthesizing new elements. There you go. It's a working tech. There we go. All right. So thank you very much for your time, guys. Buenas noches, dobra noc. Good night, buenas sera. I'll see you next time. Enjoy your week.